Welcome to our meeting in public this morning. Just like to welcome those members of the public who are with us in the room, including those who are going to be joining us for our patient story. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. And also welcome to anyone who is watching this either on our live stream or at a later date. Also want to give a particular welcome around the table to a couple of new members. We've got Elliot, our new Chief Medical Officer, joining us for the first time, I think day 3 for Elliot, so a bit of a baptism of fire. And our interim Chief People Officer, Michelle, as well, first time sitting around the table, so welcome to you both. In more sad news, it is Rob Clark's last meeting with us as our Finance Improvement Director. Rob has been giving us fantastic service for the last few months. Thank you so much for everything you've done, Rob. And very sad to see you go. I just wanted to say before we start that the purpose of today's meeting, it's now more than 6 months since Aubrey report, since our CQC warning notices. I just want to have a little bit of a pause as a group. What have we done so far? What have we achieved against that backdrop? What more do we have to do? We set out our plan, our Safe, Effective, Accountable some months ago, and we've been working to that. Is that still looking ahead? Are the actions that we planned to do 6 or more months ago, are they still the right ones? Are we on track to deliver them? What more do we have to do? So that's the focus that I want us to have today, and we'll be spending probably a little bit more time on some of those bits of work around that both look back and look forward agenda. So I'll be asking you at the end of the meeting whether we've achieved that. So just have that in mind as we go through. So just looking at our agenda, I'm a bit hamstrung because I can't get to my papers at the moment, but apologies for absence. We've got Martin Knowles, who's on annual leave. But apart from that, I think we're all here. Usual in relation. Oh, sorry, and Hayley is unable to join us this morning as well. Declarations of interest, the usual, if anyone has any particular declarations. Yes, Phil.
Sorry, Chairman, sure. As I'm now the non-exec representative at SCL, is that a declaration?
Yeah, thank you. And as Phil talked there, I remembered that I hadn't actually introduced myself. I'm Alison Marshall, I'm the Trust Chair, and could everyone, when they speak, please try and remember to introduce yourself as well. It's very helpful for those who are watching on the live stream. Moving on to the minutes of the 3rd of June. Is everyone happy with those minutes? Any changes in relation to them? Happy to approve? Great. Moving on to the action log. Warren, could you take us through those couple of things?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Warren Edge, Trust Secretary. So on the first action, Margaret, our board advisor, is currently on leave, and there's still some work on the exec groups that report into the committee. So we weren't quite ready to bring that back here in August, but should be ready with Margaret's input to give us an independent view by October. So with the board's indulgence, I would ask to defer that action to October. For the second action, Matt and I have had some discussion linking it into the development programme. Matt, did you want to come in there? Matt Graham.
Yep, so I'm Matt Graham, I'm the Acting Chief Operating Officer, and I'm also the Accountable Emergency Officer for the Trust, so EPRR is part of my responsibilities. So Warren and I have discussed, and it felt like it was more appropriate to a board workshop than to a Trust board meeting, so proposal would be that we'll bring a seminar on EPRR to the next board workshop in September, if that's okay.
Great, thanks Matt, and thanks Warren. Are we happy with those proposals? Great, thank you. As you know, we always try and start our board meetings with a patient story. I think it keeps us focused on why we are here. And I just want to thank Sonia and Michael for coming along today to help us in relation to that. I'm just going to hand over to Jill to introduce the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Morning, colleagues. Jill Hunt, Chief Nurse for the organisation, and I'd like to echo Alison's thanks to Michael and Sonia for joining us today to share. We have a video of their mother, Vincenza's care. Vincenza was a patient at UHND and Shotley Bridge Hospital, and we have a video. I think some really good learning for us as an organisation in terms of some of the key messages that come through, and Michael and Sonia will be able to be involved in any questions or discussion after we've seen the video. Thank you.
My mother loves the garden, and she'd been doing a little spot of more gardening than what she should have been doing. And I got a phone call from a neighbour to say that you best come quickly, your mum's had a fall. I was hoping it was just going to be maybe a sprained wrist or something of that ilk. But when I got here, she was lying in a heap around the side of the house, and it was clear it was something pretty serious. And I ended up having to call for an ambulance to come. I have to say the ambulance came very quickly. The team were absolutely excellent. They managed to get my mother up onto a stretcher, and they were using that gas in air to try and relieve the pain symptoms. She was obviously in a lot of pain. They subsequently got her in the back of the ambulance where they were administering the pain relief. And then one of them came into the house just to explain, what they'd done, and that they're going to have to take her through to A&E at UHND Hospital, and Sonia and I were going to follow her down. So that takes us up to the point where we got to A&E.
Well, it was very good how quickly they triaged my mother. So she was very quickly seen, and they quickly established that they needed to, get the knee in the correct position. So they actually got her sorted quite quick, didn't they? Putting her in plaster. And so I was really quite delighted, to be honest, that it was done so quickly because she was in so much pain.
Yeah, they reset the bones, didn't they?
They did, yeah. But it was very, very quickly the saw to her. And that was a tremendous relief, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. We probably got through to A&E by about midday, and by about 4 o'clock she was on the ward. So that to me was quite a quick turnaround for them, and full marks for that. Once she got settled on the wards, we came away, and at that point I thought, they'll just be putting a pot on the leg. Thankfully the hip's all right and all the rest of it. I got a phone call that evening of one of the doctors where he'd explained that the extent of the injury, it was quite serious, and that she had a distal fracture on the left leg above the knee, but she'd also cracked the knee as well. And he did explain that it would require a specialist surgeon to repair that. But he says, he reassured us and says, look, we're going to talk about it tomorrow morning. Obviously, we've got to factor in your mum's age. Being 91 in December was certainly a concern. But he did say, look, don't worry about it. The team's going to meet tomorrow. We'll do the best we can for her. So obviously, we were waiting to find that out. I think you went in the next morning, didn't you?
Yeah, because they went to sort of see how she was, and I was like, hopefully the operation, and he said yes. He says, we're going to go ahead with the operation. We just have to get everything right. The guy coming to do the knee, and we've got to make sure specialist, make sure that he's there, and we're going to go ahead and do the operation for her. So I mean, that was a tremendous relief.
Oh, very much so, yes.
Please come on, bottom my heart.
Yeah, because 91, our biggest concern was, that they might not repair it, and gosh, if they hadn't, I know she would have gone downhill very rapidly, because she's very active as well. For all she's 91 and she's got osteoporosis and all that. I think dementia went downhill rapidly, and we weren't sure if it was as a result of a UTI, because obviously I had to use a catheter. But of course, they also had to administer high dose of opiates to cope with the pain. You know, she kind of went off the rails a bit, didn't she?
Well, they tried to put nerve blocks in, I think,
Yes,
to
they
sort
did.
of, you know, prevent having to give you a massive general anesthetic, which I know is obviously a risk when you get older. But unfortunately, because of the delirium she was under, she pulled the nerve blocks out a couple of times.
She ripped them out of my legs. So,
But to be fair, they still persevered with that operation, you know, and
But I
with
did
the
have
full
to-
general, didn't they?
I mean, I appreciate the fact that the nursing staff actually rang me and says, "Look, your mum's in a bit of a state. Do you want to speak to her?" It was good that they're going to let us try and calm her down, because, you know, when she's in a strange environment, doesn't know why she's there. And I says, "Look, I'm happy to come down if you want me to come down and try and calm her down." And they said, "Well, if you want to do that." So it was good that they let us do that. I was surprised actually they agreed.
But I have to say the staff were amazing
Oh,
with her,
they were.
considering
Oh,
she was
please
presenting with these
transport.
symptoms.
Yes.
They showed,
Oh, you
you know,
are.
compassion and, you know, and they were very patient.
I mean, I tried to prevent her from ripping the tubes out
Yeah.
again, best I could. But obviously, we calmed her down as best we could. But then it transpired she ripped the tubes out again. So I thought, oh, well, that's it. I won't go ahead with the operation now. That's my biggest fear. I thought she'd blown her chance, especially because he'd explained they were going to have to get a specialist surgeon in to do the operation as well. So I was so thankful when I got a phone call, and she said she was the anaesthetist, I believe. Anyway, she went through some questions. She was very reassuring. And she says, "Don't worry, we're going to still do the operation." Obviously, I had to answer a number of questions for her. And basically, she came back on the ward on the evening, and I thought she presented quite well to say what she'd been through.
I think we were quite surprised as well. I don't know, I just expected it to be in this massive plaster again, but it was just very simple.
I think
wasn't
it
it,
was
over
that, and doesn't matter what it is, as long as I still me a little bit up there.
Yeah.
I think because she was on a lot of the really strong painkillers, I think she had good moments and other moments where,
So
you
maybe
know,
we
because she
saw her.
wanted to go home virtually as soon as she had the operation, basically. You know, which you know wasn't your fault. You were on such strong painkillers, she didn't really know what was going on. And I think that's the thing for dementia patients in hospital. Obviously, it's a different environment. It's all very confusing. So even the drugs, aside from that, you would have confusion from that. But I think the staff were very aware of that anyway. It didn't faze them. They didn't, you know. It was,
Oh, yeah.
You know.
I think one very positive thing for us was that they came and discussed where they were going to move her on to for rehabilitation. And we told them we lived in Concert and would very much like her to go to Shotley Bridge,
Yeah.
which we were so grateful that they actually got a bed at Shotley Bridge. Again, I was very pleased that one of the night nurses actually rang me and she says, "Look, your mum's very confused. Do you want to come through and try and calm her down a bit?" Because obviously with her moving from UHND, suddenly she's in Shotley Bridge, different environment. I think once we saw you, we did calm you down, didn't we? You were...
Can't remember, Michael.
No, you can't, I know.
Sorry.
Well, that was the Sunday, and then we came back a little bit later, and they was serving up the Sunday lunch. And I have to say, mind, the food was excellent, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was.
We
really
commented on
good.
the food throughout at Dryburn, UHND. It was excellent, and then it was just gradual the recovery. Again, the staff on Ward 2 were absolutely great,
Yeah, the
weren't they?
physios were great. In particular, there was Stuart, wasn't there?
Oh,
who
yeah,
came in.
yes,
I might like to mention him by name, actually, because he was very positive, and he came in and he really encouraged me, Mum, to, you know, to sort of, you know, start using the frame and to move her knee. And
I'm kind of speaking. I
Yeah,
can't
good
remember.
man. In fact,
Very
used to write things on the chart, like, what was it, "Go for it" or something.
it was like, "You can do it, gorgeous." But, you know, it was probably he knew how to inspire each of the patients, but we were very impressed with him, as well, because he did sort of encourage you, didn't he? To,
Well, I remember when she was walking up the corridor, it was
Yeah.
like he was wheeling up on the wheelchair behind,
yeah, making
watching
sure. Yeah.
just watching how the hips were moving, and you know,
He
making
did,
sure.
he did say to me, look, I want you to go right down there and I'll be behind you. He says, can you do it? I says, yes, I remember that, clear as a bell. And I did my very best, and he was absolutely lovely, lovely.
Yes.
He says, he'd been absolutely perfect.
But you come on leaps and bounds, I have to say.
Well,
Once she was at Shotley Bridge, I think obviously once you got medically fit, quite rightly the hospital were keen to move you on, and it's something I would urge thee to try and get patients out as soon as they can and board. One of the issues, unfortunately, was I think because she was on a high dose of opiates, obviously the dementia was kicking in more, was having more of an impact on our presentation. Because we did discuss with the physio about the fact we've got everything in place, the stair lift and all the rest, because when she broke her hip in 2021, and Mr. Thomas very kindly sorted her hip out, and she's been great since then, but we've still got all the adaptations and things, you know, the home was ready for her to come to. The physio team were very supportive in that. But the team went back to speak to her about that, just to clarify things, and of course she couldn't remember anything about the conversation. So they did say, you know, we have to be satisfied that she's safe. I can't, you know, say that without making a referral to social services. They need to be involved in this. So which I perfectly accepted. And they did ask about power of attorney, which we have. And obviously from their perspective, they were probably more keen, I suspect, that she maybe went under a care home initially, but we just thought that would, you know, that would have a detrimental effect on my mother, who was very desperate to get home. Once she got here, she would come on leaps and bounds, but obviously, you know, they don't know her like we know her, and they go off how she's presenting with the dementia and things. I was speaking to the sister on the ward, Sister Julie, I think it was, and she says, she was very reassuring and says, look, we've got our own social worker, Dave Palmer. He's very good, you know. I'm sure he'll support you in trying to get your mum home and all the rest of it. So, sure enough, we had a meeting with Dave Palmer later that week. And he was a really nice man, wasn't he?
He was.
Dave, very, very supportive, very nice, very good at his job. And he says, look, I'm going to support you. You know, we're going to sort a care package out.
And he agreed when he'd realised all the things we had in place already. So he was quite happy
To support.
that support us coming home, as long as we had the care package,
Yes.
which we had was Crescent Home Care.
Yes, and they've been
And
excellent
they've been
as well.
very, very good, yeah.
So she came home in the ambulance,
Yeah.
and I kid you not, as soon as she got home, she walked with the walking frame straight up to the stair lift and went upstairs and used the toilet. You know, as soon as she was home, that was it. There was no stopping her. So, you know, and
That's
she just came on leaps and bounds. You know, she was happy. She was home. She was in her home. She was, oh, thank God. So she got her own bed, and she had a TV, and you know, unfamiliar surroundings, and in all honesty, it's, you know, really back to where she was before, which is quite unbelievable. And I always check her through the night as well.
yeah,
Catch her doing things she shouldn't be doing.
yes.
Instead of using the commode, going to the toilet and things. But like I say, she's very determined. But I don't know, I think all we want to do is to thank
Yeah.
everybody, because
That's what it's all about. That's why he's going through round and round to make you understand how grateful we all are.
yes, well, I said I would write to them.
And I
which
would,
did,
and I would recommend you to anyone in my whole life.
Yeah. I
How
mean,
grateful I am, yeah.
yes, we're all very grateful.
Well, it's given her a quality of life back, which if that decision had been made at the very start, that, you know, she's too old, too osteoporosis, or,
Yeah,
you know,
oh,
dementia, we're not going to do it, then we wouldn't be here today.
We're right back to where we were, and who could have thought that on May the 18th? It looked very, very bleak. So, you know, God bless our NHS and all those that work in it, really. You don't realise till you have to use it, but brilliant job. They all
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And everybody's got their own little part to play, from the miraculous Mr. Jennings and his surgery team to you know, the cleaner on the ward, the catering team. Everybody did their bit, you know.
It's just always compassion as well,
Yeah.
and respect, and you know.
Nurses, doctors,
Yeah.
sisters. Sister Janice, she was very good, wasn't she, at Shotley Bridge? And
No, they couldn't do
Sister
enough.
Julie,
Couldn't
they
do
were
enough.
really
Always
good.
approachable, you know, and
Yeah.
brilliant.
Sonia, Michael, thank you so much for bringing us that story. How's your lovely mum?
She's doing very well. I mean, we're quite literally back to where we were, really. It's just unbelievable how she's had a whole new knee, you know. And as I say, it looked very bleak at the outset, and especially with her coming up to 91. And as it was explained that evening, I think I put it on there, but you've had to sort of curtail it. Obviously, it's long enough as it is. But it certainly looked bleak on that evening, but they reassured us to do what they could. And like I say, we're just so grateful, you know.
Well, thank you. I think this all started because you wrote to us, Michael, to say how grateful you were, and I thank you for taking the time to do that. Because we get letters of criticism quite often, but we don't necessarily get all of the good news stories. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Has anyone got any comments or questions for Michael and Sonia?
Who's doing the gardening?
Well, she tends to rely on me for that.
Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Bromley. I'm one of the non-execs. Is there anything that could have been done better, or anything? It was great to have the story, but is there anything where in your heart you think, if only that had been, it would have been even better?
I mean, we were absolutely, you know, totally satisfied with it all. I mean, if you're looking sort of for areas of improvement, I don't know how you could really. I mean, as I say, the dementia became quite acute, but you had to balance the pain of the broken limb against, you know, the fact that I had to give her those opiates. I mean, I don't know if there's alternative medications on the horizon where you perhaps don't rely on opiates with dementia people. Would that help things a little bit? I don't know, because I think that was the big concern by the team about her coming home. You know, the fact that, you know, she didn't present very well when we were in the hospital, but and she did have a UTI as well, I think, as well, which probably contributed. But, you know, we had to kind of reassure them, and by way of the fact we had the power of attorney, I think, well, I'm just reading into it, you know, did that give them a sort of, you know, legitimate reason to support us for her coming home? And if we didn't have that, would we maybe had to have gone to a care home? I don't know, I'm just surmising that. So, yeah, do you want to add anything?
Not really. I would agree with all of that. I think the people were very good at informing us at every stage what was happening, and you know, we were fully aware of the next stage, and it was only really our recovery that took that bit longer because of the various things that you've mentioned. But I don't really know what else you could have done, you know, to have made us stay any less than that. They had to make sure, obviously, that she was okay to go home. So thankfully we had that power of attorney and we had things already in place. But if people didn't have that, I dare say that, which I think is the problem now, isn't it? People are staying in hospital longer maybe than they should. But hopefully Andy Burnham will sort all that out.
Elliot Sykes, Chief Medical Officer. What a fantastic lady. A really great example of timely, compassionate and personalised care. And I was going to say the same as you just said. It really emphasises the point of communication throughout.
Yes.
In answer to your question, I think I'm an anaesthetist.
Oh, right.
I think I get the impression the team were really striving to do what I would call a morphine-sparing approach with the blocks and so on. So I think they were really striving to do that. And then just finally, a really great example of home is the best place to be. And that's what she really got going. So.
Well, our dad suffered a stroke in 2001, and he was in hospital a long time, you know. But I think the emphasis now is to try and get patients home as soon as you can, and it's better for everybody really, and better for the NHS, better for, you know, for the family, for the patient especially. So, you know, full marks for what you did in the short time that you did it as well. It's quite unbelievable.
I have to say I was just totally humbled by everything that was done for my mother. As we said in that video, when that happened, we thought, right, that's it. She's never coming home. And we were just amazed by all of the help that we got.
Mm-hmm.
So a personal thank you to you all sitting here that are all involved in all this decision making. You know, it was excellent in my mother's case, so thank you.
And just to your point, I'm aware she pulled those tubes out, which I think was the lumbar thing, where, you know, obviously you've had to then, I think she had the operation under general anaesthetic off the top of my head, but you had no option but to do that because she pulled them out twice. So I do understand that, and didn't mean it as a criticism.
Michael, Sonia, thank you so much. Can you send our best wishes to your mum?
Yes,
and
certainly.
Hopefully she'll see many more birthdays beyond beyond the 90th that she already is. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great way to start our board, thinking about that patient-centric care and the staff that work in our organisation, the care and compassion that they give. Moving on the agenda, board assurance visits. Jill, please.
Thank you, Alison. The paper in the pack talks about the board assurance visits for June and July. Just in terms of context, the board assurance visits are part of our overall quality assurance framework and are structured visits undertaken by executive directors, non-executive directors and governors, with the aim that every area within the organisation is visited on an annual basis. The paper details the 7 visits that have taken place in June and July and gives an update on those areas and the themes that we have documented. Learning is shared with the specific areas in real time, and then the reports are pulled together in terms of any thematic learning for us as an organisation. We are taking the thematic learning back through execs once a month to make sure we close the loop on some of the broader issues for us to address. I think I would say that these visits are being received really positively by staff. The approach is a 15 steps approach in terms of the environment, but also a really good opportunity for colleagues to speak with both patients and relatives about their experience of care, and also to colleagues around things like escalation of risk, things that are concerning them, and to test out some of our assumptions around our ongoing improvement. The paper talks about some of the themes that we are working on. There's a theme around communication, the whole "hello, my name is" piece, pretty fundamental but really important. Visibility of medical teams has come up as a theme, and some broader learning around access to different languages and information in different languages. There's certainly a theme, and I can this resonates with me on a number of visits I've been on. I'm sure it does with other colleagues, around storage and maximising our facilities. We've got quite a lot of clutter in areas, and there's certainly key pieces of work around decluttering and making best use of the rooms that we've got. So I'm happy to take any questions. I think, as I say, the visits are really helpful in terms of our visibility, as well as testing out assurance and speaking with people in receipt of care and people who work within the organisation.
That's great, Jill. And in terms of the actions that are coming out of there and the governance around that, where do those actions get picked up?
So we're looking at a broader level. So we've got actions within the wards and departments which come through care group governance. We've got actions that are exec-led that are coming through our executive weekly meeting. We're taking that action tracker through on a monthly basis, and we'll feed in more formally through quality committee up to board.
Thank you, Jill. Adam.
Adam Cramsey, non-exec director. So I just want to echo the point, the positivity of the visits. I think it's the approach doing it with NEDs and execs and governors, as you know, together is really positive to work on. 2 points to raise. It's very ward focused currently, and I think that's important for us to get onto the wards where patient care has been delivered out in both the community and in the main hospital sites. What's our view on how we assure ourselves on support teams and the wider organisation rather than it just being a ward focus? The second point is, to Alison's challenge right at the start, how do we assure ourselves this is making a difference? Because it could just be that we turn up, have a nice chat, walk away. How do we get the assurance back that it actually matters?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great points. I mean, I think informally, certainly when colleagues and I have been recently to Shotley Bridge, we visited outpatients and the urgent treatment centre as an aside, but I think you're absolutely right. We need to build that more formally into the programme, and we need to be bringing back through quality committee and board where we've closed the loop, where's outstanding, what do we need more traction on. So we build that governance around the process. I think they're both very valid points.
David.
David Jackson, non-exec director. Jill, what's the feedback from the staff and the team? Because it's a much better system now. It's more formalised as the 15 steps, and are they positive about that, or do they feel that it's perhaps sometimes an intrusion? I mean, I've never felt that when I've been. It's always been quite positive, but it'd be just nice to get any feedback from the staff.
Thank you, David. I think the purposeful approach of the board, both execs and non-exec directors and governors, about visibility and increasing visibility has landed really well. I think staff are really pleased to see us. Colleagues are happy to share with us. So the informal soft intelligence is really positive. And I think the more we're out and about, the more people get used to seeing us, and the more people are happy to approach us out with any formal process. So I haven't heard any negative feedback at all from any of our visits. Quite the opposite.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Phil?
Phil Kane, non-executive director. It sort of touches on Adam's comment and David's comment. Are we feeding back to the ward managers directly at a later date about the things that we've done? Because what you sort of suggested is a lot of the feedback is going in at relatively high level, and what we need to know is that the foot soldiers on the ground are getting the message that we've heard, and we're doing something about it.
Thanks, Phil. The actual reports, the formal reports, go directly to the ward managers as well as whoever we've interacted with on the day, and there's an expectation that those reports and actions are shared within the wards team. We probably need to do some testing of that to be assured that that happens, but it actually goes directly to the ward manager. If the ward manager hasn't been on duty on that day, that these are the findings and these are the suggested improvement actions.
I understand that, and I know that part of the process, but I think there are some things that are raised during the visits which would make a very big difference to some of the staff if they were sorted out. And I think we perhaps need to look at those and provide feedback that we've taken notice that we've done something, because it's the sort of, you said we did, but I think we need to show that we're actively listening and doing something about it.
Great, thank you. Jill will take that for assurance that the visits are happening, and I think in due course, as the actions start coming back through committees, etc., we'll get assurance that they are actually having the impact that Adam was talking about. So thank you. Moving on, we've got the Chair's report. Since we were last together as a board, and I was here as an interim chair at that stage, the governors have had a very rigorous process, and I can absolutely vouch for that, to appoint a new chair. I'm very pleased to say that I was successful in that process, and I would just like to thank the governors in particular for their confidence in me and for giving me the opportunity to continue to lead this fantastic trust. And also thank you to everyone else that was involved. Some sitting around this table were involved in parts of the process, but we had external stakeholders involved as well, and other members of staff. So just thank everyone for the time that they took to engage with the process. And as I say, I'm very pleased that I was successful. In terms of my report, otherwise I'll keep it short because we've got a lot on the agenda, and there's quite a lot of the things that I've been involved in that are elsewhere on the agenda, such as the road shows, etc. Just to give you a flavour of some of the other activities, as it were, I've met with our chaplains. Very interesting conversation. I think there's a lot that the chaplains do in this organisation to assist both patients and staff, and they're quite an interesting eye on the world of our culture in the organisation. I've met with the Friends of Darlington Memorial Hospital, who do a fantastic job as volunteers, looking after our patients here at Darlington. I've met with other volunteers, Volunteers Week. I'm going to particularly call out Terry, who works in our radio up in Durham. He has volunteered for hospital radio for 60 years now. Great guy. I've also met with a number of the network chairs. Again, I think that the networks could be better here and need more support, and I know we'll be working on that in the future. Externally, met Durham University. We've got a very strong partnership with Durham University and working closely with them, particularly in relation to research, and Teesside University as well. Had a great event with them down on Teesside. So just to give you a flavour of some of the other things that perhaps don't come out of the board papers. But otherwise, I think they do. There is an item there for the public board meeting schedule, a forward look planner. If anyone's got any queries in relation to matters that they think should be on there that aren't currently, then have a word with myself or Warren, and we'll get it put on. So I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that now. If not, then I shall pass on to Steve for the Chief Exec report. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Alison. Good morning, everyone. My name's Steve. I'm the Chief Exec here at CDFT. Apologies that my report's a bit long. There's been a fair bit going on since we were last together. So I'll take it that colleagues have had a chance to read it, but I wanted to draw out a few points in kind of 4 sections. And this partly responds or is framed by Alison's point earlier, that it's an opportunity for us to just think about what we've done and, importantly, what we've still to do following the publication of Safe, Effective and Accountable, which was our response to the Albury Governance Review, but also the findings from the CQC visit and inspection, which took place in December. So the first section, just to highlight a couple of points on, is around sort of leadership and engagement. Just to reflect Adam's point, one of the things that came through very loud and clear in the staff survey, one of the things that came through very loudly in the Albury report, and one of the things that came through very loudly through the CQC inspection was a desire from colleagues for much stronger connection between the board and the shop floor. That absolutely needs to be done with the intention that Adam and Phil have rightly challenged on, which is it has to have effect and purpose, and we need to make sure that we're closing the loop. But there was an absolute desire, I think, for stronger connection and engagement. So there's a couple of parts to this. We also said to the CQC, we said to them in the presentation that we gave when they joined us in December, that we were conscious that we needed to refresh and simplify the strategy for the trust and what we were going to concentrate on to become a stronger organisation that is a good place to work and a good place to receive care in. We've had the fantastic experience that Vincenza's had, and that is important to celebrate, but we also know that that's not the experience all of our patients currently have. So over the last few months, We've done some work to refresh the strategic priorities for the Trust. They're in the paper. There are 6 of them rather than 19. There's a few final sort of word tweaks that have been made since they went into the paper, but we've tested them with colleagues in the organisation through the roadshows, which we'll talk about later. In truth, they've had less engagement from patients and communities than we would like, but they've been informed by what we've learnt from patients so far about what's important to them and what their current experience of us is. And so these priorities, as we've discussed in the board development workshops, are intended as a sort of interim to allow us to focus on the next 18 to 24 months and be clear about what we need to make progress on. And we'll, with Kelly and Gillian, we've been discussing how we start a programme of engagement with patients and communities to learn more about what their priorities are, because they may well be different, and they will be different in different places, and we need to reflect that in the work that we do. The second thing, perhaps just to say, is it's fine to have those as 6 kind of high-level priorities. We've got a lot to do in this financial year and into next financial year. And so the exec team have been doing some work to more clearly articulate the key priorities for this financial year and into next financial year against each of those priorities. And we hope that that will also help bring a bit of clarity and focus for the whole organisation more broadly. The second thing I wanted to touch on was just there's a bit of detail in how we have tried to engage with colleagues in the organisation. Jill's covered the board assurance visits, and there's a section in the paper that just tries to set out some of the activities that we've also been undertaking. So we spend, as an exec team, at least a morning, an afternoon or an evening a month all shadowing a team. We rotate that round the sites. To Adam's point, some of those are clinical teams, some of them are not. And they are amongst the best days of our months, to be honest. You learn absolutely loads. And they can be, you can learn some really simple things that need to be resolved and addressed, to Phil's point earlier. So Rob shadowed one of the dietitians, I think 2 cycles ago, who flagged that they were delighted, they were well set up because they could prescribe nutritional supplements, but had huge frustration that they weren't able to stop them. And they had to go and find a doctor to make the change because of the way the EPR was set up. Anyway, Rob, with colleagues, got that fixed. It's a small thing. Arguably, it shouldn't have taken any of us to resolve that, so we need to make sure that's not the experience of colleagues going forward. But it was addressed and fixed. And to spare Rob's blushes, the colleague gave him an excellence report, which he has reminded us of probably every other month. So they're really important points for us. And many of us do shadowing and so on outside of that as well. We have a weekly session that's open to all colleagues across the Trust to just get a bit of an update on what's going on, but also to ask questions that they may have of us. There are some things that we are trying to do to strengthen our connection. So I am conscious that whilst we've got those things in place, it's really important to us that we draw a stronger connection with the clinical leaders in the organisation. That's not just doctors, by the way, that's senior nurses, senior therapists, and so on. So with Elliot joining, Elliot and Jill will now co-chair a clinical leadership forum once a month, which will be quite a large forum. So we have got a large number of clinical leaders across the organisation, and that will hopefully allow us to shrink the distance between the boardroom and those who are leading services on a day-to-day basis. And our intention is to have the first one of those in September. And then one of the things that colleagues have said to us through the roadshows, and again, there's a bit of information about what we've learned and heard through the roadshows. There's a set of things that we've learned that we need to act on and make sure that we feed back on. But there was quite a desire for colleagues in sort of band 7 and above roles to have a stronger connection and understanding of what was happening in the organisation. There's no perfect way to do this, but we are intending to do a monthly team brief with a large number of colleagues to both update on what's happening, but also as a way of listening and getting feedback from colleagues about what's in their way and what they need from us. And there's been, as you'll see, some communities of practice that we've tried to set up where people are interested in topics. I think the most The one that's drawn the most interest so far is EPR, that has had huge engagement from colleagues on what they want to see addressed, and on Copilot, which people have wanted to learn how to use as well. So there's quite a lot going on. Again, we need to sort of take a pause in a few months and check that it's working, and that it's not just one-way learning for us, but it is very grounding. And just to give you a specific example, through the roadshows, we've learned absolutely tons. And although there's a summary in the paper, that probably doesn't do complete justice to what we've learned. And the things that we've learned are not the things that we would have talked about in a boardroom, a committee room, or a management meeting. And one of the things that colleagues have flagged quite consistently as we've done them is a perspective on transfers between our hospitals. So Vincenza was in Shotley Bridge and didn't need to return to one of the acute sites, but some patients do. And through the roadshows as well, colleagues have described the current pathway, which is not a pathway that is very patient-centred. Jill and the senior nurses are now leading a piece of work across a number of pathways that are not particularly patient-centred so that we can make changes and improve them. So it's just a small example of stuff that you pick up in these sorts of environments that you probably wouldn't pick up in others. The second part of the report, if I just move on, is around a couple of updates around quality. And Jill's got more detail on some of these in her paper later, but it's important that I flag them as well. So the first part is just to formally acknowledge that the CQC have now published the reports. The inspection was in December, the reports were published in June, which happened in between our last board cycle. So there's just a brief summary, which will be very familiar to colleagues, of what the CQC found. We have not waited until the reports were published. We've got some warning notices and feedback in December, and the work that we've been doing since December has been shaped by that feedback and by some of the feedback in the warning notices. Some of the feedback in the CQC reports, as we've rehearsed around this table before, is difficult to read. And it's also important to say that is the basis on which we then take action to try and make improvements, which Jill will cover in her paper later. I think it's also important, and this was a bit of feedback that we got from the roadshows as well from colleagues, which is there's a lot for us to improve in the trust. People acknowledge that and recognise it. But both things can be true in the sense that we can have some care that is not where we want it to be, and many patients can get really good care. Vincenza's one example, and she's not the only one. And I think it's important that we concurrently acknowledge and celebrate the fact that the community services in the trust were rated as good, and good across all domains. And in reality, most people get most of their care in their own homes. And so to have district nursing, podiatry, community rehab, physiotherapy, advanced nurse practitioners, and the services that they offer to keep people well and at home rated as good should be a source of confidence and pride for the organisation. There's still lots to improve on, and with neighbourhood health coming, there's great opportunity, but I think it's important that we acknowledge and respond to that. One of the colleagues that we met in one of the roadshows said to us, you would almost not have known that the services had been rated as good because it was a very small add-on to the way that we shared the findings from the CQC report. So I think it's just a good reminder to us as we go forward. All that said, I just wanted to draw out a couple of areas to alert the board to. So the first is around maternity. Maternity's been on a journey of improvement from a pretty challenging starting point a few years ago. And we'll have Kim's report later, but just to highlight to the board that we have had a number of safety signals through the maternity oversight system called MOSS, and they reflect care to some women and their families that fell below the standards that we would like. There's been some important immediate learning from those, and some changes have been made and some support put in place. But we've also taken the opportunity to stand back and to think about maternity services more generally. And again, we'll cover this later, but to kind of flag to the board that we've had a conversation with the National Maternity Team who are currently working with us on our improvement journey, and signalled that we think, given the circumstances, we would benefit from some more intensive support over the next period of improvement, which they've agreed, and we've been in a process of discussing what shape that will take. That's likely to start on site in around September, and we'll use August to kind of set that up in the right way with the teams across maternity, so midwives, maternity care assistants, the obstetricians and the anaesthetists, because maternity is an absolute MDT service, so we need to make sure we're covering all of those. And that team will support a further sort of diagnostic and then improvement work from there. The second thing was just to update you on plastics. We confirmed to the board that we were doing a review of plastic surgery, and phase 1 of that's completed. That has identified a small number of patients where we needed to take some action. That has been done. But again, in terms of some wider learning, we've agreed a second phase to that review, which is being led by an external plastic surgeon, and that is underway and is about us trying to make sure that we've got a clinically sustainable plastic surgery, plastic surgical service that is well set up and will meet the needs of patients in a DGH type environment. If I just move on to a brief update on where we are against sort of 26, 27, we're coming into August and September, so getting to halfway through the year. We, as colleagues around the table now, have quite a challenging plan to deliver across quality, access and finance. There's more detail in Rob's report and Matt's report later on. So the biggest area of risk, I think, from an access point of view is probably referral to treatment at the moment. And Matt will update on the work to try and recover and improve waiting times later on. And Matt will also say that whilst cancer is, well, I don't know if he'll say this, but I think he'll say this. I think he'll say this. That there are some early signs of improvement in cancer performance, but we've still got a road to travel. And in terms of our financial sustainability, you'll see from the papers, we are on track at the moment, but the rest of the year contains quite a high degree of risk, both in terms of identification of the final bit of the CIP, which we think we've got a path to, but then importantly delivering that and making sure that those changes are recurrent in a move away from where we've perhaps been in the past. We're obviously part of the National Oversight Framework, which includes finance in the way that organisations are assessed and judged. The local NHS England team have introduced an additional assessment on finance called the Provider Assurance Model. There are 2 PAMs in the NHS, one's on estates, this one's on finance. And that is identifying, that is also placing organisations into different categories. You'll see that we've been placed into the into category 3, which highlights the point I've just made, which is our plan has quite a degree of risk in it. What that means at the moment is we are now submitting quite a range of data to NHS England on a weekly basis. The first one will go off today. That requires Chief Exec sign-off, and I think we can expect an ongoing dialogue that will come out of that rhythm as it gets established. And then the final section of the report, just to draw to colleagues' attention, is a summary of the key sort of policy announcements that have been made by NHS England. You'll see it's been a busy period, and that list is not quite complete. So there's some additional policy guidance that came out around maternity triage, the Leadership College, and a couple of other things. So there's quite a lot for us to work our way through. All I'm doing at this point is saying this is what's come out and giving you a bit of a signal as this is where we will need to give the board assurance or the committee's assurance about the key expectations. And there is an increasing theme, I guess, that as as policy is announced and expectations of the NHS are confirmed, there's an increasing focus on board certification and board statements. And you'll see that there's a number in here that we will have to review, confirm that we're content that we are meeting those expectations, and then publicly declare that we've met those met or haven't met those standards. So I'm sorry, that's quite a lot. I'll stop there. I'm sure there may be questions which I'm happy to take, obviously.
Thank you, Steve. Liz. Thanks, Steve. Really, is that on?
Yes, it is on.
Oh, it is on. Thanks. Yeah. Liz Bromley, non-exec. Thanks, Steve. Really comprehensive, really good report. Just a really quick question. In respect of maternity services, have you made any links with Newcastle? Because they have been on a similar journey. When the Ockenden and Amos reports came out with the 10-point plan, Newcastle was already covering off most of those points, and they have extended the hand of friendship should you want it.
That's really helpful, Liz. Thank you. The directors of midwifery have quite a tight network, but I think organisationally, so we're as you know from our other sort of improvement areas, I think learning from other organisations is really important. It's great. You always learn something when you talk to somebody else. And honestly, why reinvent some of the wheels? So yeah, that's really helpful. We'll reach out to Rob and the team and Ian.
Adam.
Thanks. 2 points. First one, I just want to echo the point around the good findings from a CQC perspective in community services. So Alice and I were out visiting Sedgefield a couple of weeks ago, and there was not a largely single negative comment from any patient that we spoke to, and we spoke to a lot of patients. So, echoing the actual experience on the ground is definitely there. The second point, you mentioned the changing policy, strategy, guidance, 3 health secretaries, 2 prime ministers between board meetings. You've named the main ones there around the quality strategy, the NHS staff standards. How are we going to ensure that we're not looking at all of these things in silo? Because it would be very easy to put assurance through committees in silo, and then second to that, in your paper you reference the new strategy that's launching and the new strategic pillars that are within there. How do we ensure that we keep a laser focus on that while we're getting pinged from every angle from different guidance documents and policies?
I always love your easy questions. So, by the way, I didn't make the comment about 3 secretaries of state and prime. That was all you. So it's a very fair point. So to stand right back, dealing with none of the things that have been published are unreasonable expectations. They're all completely reasonable. They're good for patients. They're good for staff. Even in this is my view, so others may have quite rightly different ones. Even in a stable organisation, delivering all of the expectations in those documents would be a challenge, I would say. And I think for us as an organisation, where we're less stable and we've got a number of areas to try and make progress on, that makes your point even more important. So I think we're now 6 months on. We'll come to the sort of update on safe, effective and accountable. Life has moved on. We've dealt with some things. We've identified some new things that need to be considered, and we've matured as an organisation or as a leadership team. So one of the things that we've been discussing is lock down the 6 strategic priorities, which helpfully do align with the new quality strategy and the 10-year plan neighbourhood health. But to stand back and say, what's the right overarching improvement plan for the next 18 to 24 months, which will contain some of what's gone before, it'll contain some of what's in here, but I think we will have to agree what we don't do immediately. And that's not to say that we won't deal with and address the kind of expectations in all of these documents, but it's just that I don't think we'll be able. It would be unrealistic to say that we'll do them all at the same time. So that's why I think we want to do that. Here's the 6 key areas of focus. Here are the more detailed things that we need to absolutely focus on, that are the very most important ones. And here are the things that we will need to get to in time, as it were. And then do that as a whole. We've been having a conversation, Adam, with another organisation that's got multiple challenges about the approach they've taken. They've taken a bit of that approach. Kelly and I had that conversation the other day. So I think we probably want to bring that back to a board development type workshop.
Thanks, Adam. Phil.
Phil Kane, non-exec. It's sort of expanding on Adam's question that we've talked about sort of the short term and the medium term. If you believe the HSJ, there's just been an instruction to redraw ICB boundaries, to align with local government by 2029, I think. Do we think that's going to have any implications for our future? Do we need to start factoring in longer term issues into our planning rather than just short and medium term?
Yeah, good question, Phil. The immediate sort of implications of alignment with strategic authorities doesn't have an immediate impact on us because our ICB is, and we are coterminous with the two strategic authorities, so the North East Combined Authority and the Tees Valley Combined Authority. There are some potential implications around the commissioning part of the ICB that commissions Cumbria, so it's possible that there'll be a change in that context, but we are coterminous with those two strategic authorities. All that said, I think you can get a sense from the new government about its intention to devolve, and so making sure that whilst we've got a lot to do internally and we shouldn't lose attention on that, we need to make sure that we are keeping an eye on and building the relationships into those combined authorities. Most of our relationships are with the local government, so Durham County Council and Darlington Council, and they're good and they will remain important. But it looks like strategic authorities are going to have a more important role. Sorry, not a more important role, but they have an important role. And so we'll need to keep making sure that we play into those. We're an organisation that will play into both combined authorities. That's the same across many parts of the country. I expect at some point there'll be a question about how many combined strategic authorities do you need, but that's a question for others.
Thanks, Phil. Anything else on Steve's report? No, thank you, Steve. We'll note those. I think combination of taking some of it for assurance and some of it for knowledge, really, in terms of the bigger landscape that's out there. So thank you. We'll move on. You have an appendix in terms of a AAA report. Anything you want to say about that?
I don't think so. It's just to try and make sure that the board's got a bit of visibility over what CLT is up to, and it's called a combined AAA because the collective leadership team receives AAAs from the kind of management groups that support the delivery of our plan. So it's trying to give you a bit of a sense of the key issues that have been discussed. I'm sure we'll improve them over time. Although there's a chunky amount in the alert section, Alison, that they're to alert the board that CLT is aware of these issues and working on them, as opposed to currently needing the board to do anything.
Okay, thank you. Move on to our next agenda item, which is sorry. It might help if I actually put my own mic on as well. Maggie.
Maggie Pavlo, Non-Exec Director. It's just on that very last point on the consolidated report. I was just, when I looked at it, if that's a summary of the CLT alerts, I was just a little concerned that there was nothing around our people on that bit, because I do believe from the stuff that's coming through from PCC that would be up there.
I nearly got away with a question without a question from Maggie. So very, very fair point. So it's not that the people and culture aspects of the organisation are not important to CLT and not discussed. It's just they weren't discussed in the last meeting. We focused quite heavily on a set of quality and safety issues. So that's the reason that it's not flagged in there. But CLT has had a number of development sessions that have been focused around culture and priority work.
Thank you. We'll move on to the Integrated Improvement Plan generally, but we'll start with the Safe, Effective, Accountable report. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Kelly Angus. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive here at CDDFT. There are 3 elements to this agenda item, so I will cover off the first element, which is an update on the Safe, Effectable and Accountable programme. Jill Hunt, our Chief Nurse, will provide a more detailed update on the Breast Improvement programme and also on the CQC inspections. So in terms of the update on the Safe, Effectable and Accountable programme, as both Steve and Alison said earlier, this was in response to the publications that were made from November 25 onwards, which were independent reviews which took place in relation to breast services, leadership and governance, which also included the Aubrey report and the CQC findings. A significant amount of work has been undertaken in relation to the elements of the findings from each of these publications. And as part of the Trust's response, there was a number of work streams and programmes which were established. Those work streams and programmes were leadership and corporate governance, clinical governance, culture, management of and support for doctors, financial governance and contract management, the breast service specific recommendations, and also a number in relation to staff and patients. I'll provide a brief summary in relation to each of those aspects. Happy to take any questions. And as Alison said, we may wish to spend some time on the potential way forward as we move forward for the next 12 to 18 months. So in relation to each of the areas, I think it's fair to say a significant amount of progress has been made overall. Many of the areas which have been identified, particularly for immediate responses or actions to be taken within 6 to 12 months, are currently ahead of trajectory in terms of completion. In relation to each of the areas, leadership and corporate governance, in terms of the areas of which we have completed, we've recruited 5 new non-executive directors, all of which, other than one, are sitting around this table now. And some of that has been about how we strengthen the board in relation to the broader areas of expertise, but also how we bring independent thinking, challenge, and also the transformation that the organisation requires. As I'm sure our non-executive colleagues will be testament to this, but they've been integrated into the board and also into the committees, particularly around their areas of expertise, which has certainly brought challenge for us as an executive team, but also has brought strength to some of our thinking and some of our strategic developments as we move forward. We've undertaken a significant redesign of the floor to board or board to ward governance, and this has had a significant change for the organisation in relation to the governance structures, the way the organisation escalates, and also the routine use of AAA reports, some of which, all of which you see here at board today. So these governance structures will be continuously reviewed, and we have an independent board advisor who is working with us around the effectiveness of these arrangements, and that includes the effectiveness of our local committees which support our board arrangements. Our care groups have now established their own governance structures, and these are being strengthened with the support of the independent board advisor, and they will be under continuous review as we move forward. We have strengthened our executive team, we have a number of new appointments, and we also have had a series of development opportunities both as an executive team and as a board, and also with our leadership teams, and that has been fundamental in terms of how we bring the organisation together in terms of our operational expertise and also our future leadership and our development as an organisation. We have focused on culture in terms of having an open and transparent culture where colleagues can speak up safely, and we have clarified a range of governance responsibilities, and we are currently in the process of recruiting a new Director of Corporate Governance, Legal and Assurance as Warren is leaving us as he retires, and that will help us manage the structures and accountability required of what we will believe to be a well-governed organisation. We have a new Chief Medical Officer, who is here with us today, and we are now reviewing how we engage across a number of our clinical teams, and that includes, as Steve said earlier, the introduction of our very first clinical leadership forum, which will really help us focus on how we are clinically led as an organisation. We have a number of actions which remain for the next 12 to 18 months within that area, and that includes further defining roles and responsibilities, ensuring that our new governance model is well embedded and that it is evaluated as to how effective it is, and that the changes to our leadership structures are embedded and that they are well established in relation to governance, oversight and assurance. And we anticipate that those actions will take us up until June 2027. I'll move on to clinical governance. So in terms of clinical governance, we're Steve, Alison, other members of the board, and certainly from an executive and non-executive perspective, putting quality and safety at the heart of what we do has been a very strong theme from over recent months. We have an enhanced reporting through to our board's quality committee, and we have a chair of that committee who is Adam Crampsey, our non-executive director. We are using the learning that we are gaining in relation to our quality and safety as to how that helps us develop our clinical strategy, and we are focusing on the introduction of a new integrated quality and performance report, and that information will be embedded into our revised governance structures as we move forward. As Steve said earlier, staff have engaged through a range of methods, and it's been really positive to get out there and see and engage with staff through these methods. Have included our broadcast, which is Team Talk, where staff have the opportunity to raise questions, and also the Chief Executive roadshows, together with our learning from incidents, our complaints and shadowing and patient experience. We've had a range of developments around digital, as Steve referred to earlier, and how effective our digital solutions are and how they work for staff in practice has been really heartwarming to have the level of engagement that we have received. And that has been across clinical and non-clinical areas where we've had engagement with good suggestions around key improvements, but also a strong focus on safety standards, and that work is already underway and is heavily led by our Chief Clinical Information Officer, Dr. Niraj Nirajan. Our ward board walkabouts, which you've heard about earlier, have a regular schedule of visits now. We've reviewed our governance forums, and we also have strong escalation processes in place. As I said earlier, our committee structures have been revised, and we've also introduced a new patient experience method, and that has been helped through multidisciplinary learning around current practices. We still have a number of actions which we need to undertake, and we anticipate these will take until spring 2027. Some of these include the data sets that we use to ensure that we have the right data sets in place and that we're using those and monitoring them at the right levels. Our systems capability, we need to review those and ensure that we have significant participation and involvement in national data audits. We also need to ensure that our consideration is given to commissioning and developing our well-led review, and we anticipate that we will do that through September this year, but it will actually take place in spring 27. Our safety protocols for our systems need to be in place and enhanced. Not that they're not in place, sorry, just to say that they do need to be enhanced, and we do want to further develop and implement our accreditation for a number of areas, and recently we've had accreditation for the elective hub at Bishop Auckland Hospital, which was very well received. In terms of culture, we have a range of work, but senior leaders are committed to being more visible across the trust, and we certainly have been part of that. I was shadowing one of our clinical site managers yesterday. That was a very positive experience and lots of challenges as well. The roadshows that Steve referred to earlier, we've had those in place across 11 sites, and we've got an accountability framework which will also be published in September 26, which relates to our standard financial instructions. The People and Culture Committee has now been introduced, and that is chaired by Maggie Pavlou as our non-executive director, and that committee now has oversight for ensuring that the culture of the trust is improved, but also how we promote and support our staff as part of that culture improvement journey, which the committee has oversight of. We are promoting a strong incident reporting culture, and particularly in relation to duty of candour, and our board members have also had appraisals and objectives set as part of that. There is some detailed work in relation to culture, and some of that is still ongoing. So in terms of Q3 for 2026, there's some work in relation to the Civility Saves Lives campaign, our Freedom to Speak Up work, and also our Restorative Just Culture. and also how our leaders are developed across the organisation. That includes clinical and non-clinical leaders, and how we have a learning response and how we aim to increase our staff engagement. There was also a section published around the management of and support for doctors. Dr. Shafi Kamaradin's not here today, but certainly Shafi, prior to Elliot's appointment as the Acting Executive Medical Director, he worked with a team of colleagues around this work stream and has supported doctors around consultant training pathways, and that work is ongoing around how we support doctors who are not on the specialist register, which includes their redeployment and progression. The Trust has changed its policies and procedures around the appointment of consultants to ensure that it only appoints individuals for those who are on the specialist register. We have reviewed our medical workforce governance, and the People and Culture Committee take a strong oversight of that now, and our medical appraisal and revalidation policy has been reviewed together with our medical appraiser training. There is still significant work which is included in the report, which includes for the next 12 to 18 months there are a number of key points that we need to focus on in relation to reviewing doctors' job plans, around how we embed our new medical appraisal arrangements, how we also support the monitoring of training compliance, and how we support our SES doctors around some of their development and funding arrangements to support that. Job plans, again, the compliance for those job plans, and also some of our workforce planning around our clinical strategies. There's a section around financial governance and contract management, and a lot of that was related around our insourcing and outsourcing arrangements. They've now been fully exited by the majority of services. We've got a full review and a strong, robust arrangement around contract monitoring, which is also supported through the development of a full contract register. The commercial function has also been strengthened, and our procurement function of SCL, together with our finance colleagues, have established some strong formal governance arrangements for those. The Trust's Quality Committee has oversight in relation to our clinical activity and governance arrangements. And also we have plans, and we are developing those plans with partners around how we review our fragile services, and our partners have been incredibly supportive of the Trust, just to reiterate the point made by Steve earlier around our partnership working across organisations within the region. There are a number of dashboards which are also supporting our finance and reporting, and that has been hugely helpful. We have 2 actions which need to remain around the assurance framework, which will take us up until the spring of 27 to do, and also outcomes from our reviews. And the breast service specific recommendations, I will leave for Jill to provide a more detailed update, but you will see there that significant progress has been made, but there are still some actions which remain. In terms of just points for the committee to note, significant progress has been made in relation to responding to the Safe, Effective and Accountable programme. However, whilst that progress has been made, we should note that whilst the trajectory against progress is positive, there are still a number of key actions to complete, and we do need to monitor those as a board, but also to determine whether those actions are the correct actions as we move forward following such a significant review. Today we are asking the board to review the actions that remain and receive the paper and receive further updates as we continue. I'll leave it there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kelly. As you say, it's good to look back on what we've done, but also I'm very conscious that there's a lot of new pairs of eyes around this room from when this document was first pulled together and the plan put in place. So different pairs of eyes see different things. So it's really important to look back and see what we've done, but it's really important looking forward. Were what we identified then, which I think was probably about week 6, Steve, of being here. Are we still on the right track with some of those longer term objectives, or do we need to amend them in some way? So, Liz.
Thank you. Liz Bromley, non-exec. Wow, such a lot of work. Old eyes or new eyes, such a lot of work, such a lot of good intentions. The one question I had over a slightly missing bit was, given the focus on evaluating and embedding the new governance structures, no mention of the shifts in our governor model. Yes. And I just wondered, given the absolutely right focus on the effectiveness, the impact of, but also adding in the enormous burden on executive time of putting all of this into place, whether there is a way of weaving that review of the governor model into the governance, effectiveness and efficiency, just so that it's in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Adam.
Adam Cramsey, Non-Exec Director. Culture. It's the most important part of this whole piece and the hardest part of this whole piece. And we talk in the paper about the culture barometer being developed still. I guess the question then is twofold. One for exec colleagues around how do we measure the meaningful change in the culture that we can understand that we're shifting in the right direction in lieu of a barometer. And then the question for Maggie, as Chair of People and Culture Committee, how are we assuring ourselves as a board that we are moving that culture forward in line with the actions that are in here?
So first question. Steve or Kelly? Kelly? Steve?
I'll pick it up, and I'm sure Maggie and Steve and others will want to add. The cultural barometer is a range of indicators that are drawn from a number of evidence-based, and they are things that we can measure. We will be sharing much more detail of that with the board in due course, and some of those indicators are well nationally known in relation to things that are drawn from the staff survey, indicators which are measured on a daily basis, such as sickness absence, freedom to speak up, etc. It's how we illustrate that to staff that that measure is made. There will be some work to do around, and I think this goes back to some of the work that we have learnt from the roadshows about what matters to our colleagues. There is certainly a need for strong, simplistic language. We've got to communicate well, and we've got to do that regularly. So the cultural barometer, whilst it's evidence-based, it won't stop us from measuring and hearing other things and responding to them correctly.
Maggie?
Yeah, Maggie Pablo, Non-Exec. Thank you for that, Adam. I think suffice to say, the PCC committee is on it, and we are aware of the need to be able to evidence some change. Realistically, culture is the hardest thing in the world to actually evidence, because it is really about what does it feel like to work here? What does it feel like to come here? What does it feel like to be a patient here? And it is now impossible to put a percentage on that. But everything that Kelly said about barometers and all of the different measurement tools are there, but they're not there. They're not all there yet in one neatly packaged parcel that we can say, and this is what we're going to use. But there is a raft of things. And I think with Michelle coming on board now, and us looking at, again, paring down that to say, actually, what are we going to use? What can we use? But then what does it actually feel like on the ground? So there's still work to be done. We are not there, but we are on a trajectory.
Michelle.
Thanks. Michelle Evans, Interim Chief People Officer. So obviously this is early days for me, week 5 in the Trust, and just reflecting on what Maggie has said, one of the things that is really important as well around the barometer is that triangulation of data as well, and how we make sure that if we've got an indicator that's going slightly off in one area, how does that link in with the others? And I don't think, again, we've quite nailed that, but it is something that we're working on and looking at. And it's also about the softer things that is quite difficult to measure in terms of the things that people are saying and things that we're hearing that might not be coming through some of those indicators as well. So it's a mix of both. The data will tell us some things, but also what's the soft intelligence, and that'll come from us when we're going around doing the visits and the shadowing, etc. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Alison. So I just wanted to make a slightly broader point in response to your nudge there, Adam, which is the kind of first steps that we said we would take in Safe, Effective and Accountable were exactly that. They were like first baby steps. So I think it's important to say, look, there is a lot that has been started. I don't think anyone sat around this table would say we have cracked culture. As I thought you just say that. And I think you know, the barometer is an important part of the package, but this is about the work that we all need to do on how the organisation will be in 3-5 years' time. That is all about, well, not all about, but it is substantively about what is important to the organisation. We've set that out in terms of our attempt to reset that quality is our guiding principle. Colleagues wouldn't say that that's what they feel just yet. It is absolutely about the standards that we accept, and what colleagues would say, I think, in this space is the behaviours that we accept, and how well we equip people to lead, no matter what your professional background, and it's how people experience, how patients experience us, and how colleagues in the organisation experience each other on a day-to-day basis. I know that's all dead obvious. It's also dead hard to measure. But I kind of wanted to say, we've taken a set of first baby steps. They're dead important. But there's a huge, we've said it before in board, this is the thing that we've got to improve and tackle over time. But there are some areas where I think we probably need to be a bit more decisive. And again, through the roadshows, colleagues have said that they don't know or recognise the values that the organisation says are its values, and want to have a reset on what is it that we stand for in the organisation. So I wanted to add that in, Alison.
Thank you. Final question, Lisa.
Thank you, Alison. Lisa Quinn, Non-Executive Director. Kelly, thank you very much for the paper. I think it's a really helpful paper that sets out all of the excellent work that's been done in what I would describe as setting the foundations. And for me, it's now about embedding, but also sustaining something that the organisation believes in and lives by. My comment was going to be on your challenge, Alison, on all the things that we're looking forward next to do, the right things, and just reflecting on the conversations we've had so far in the board, both today and previously. I do question whether we are citing the value of what our patients say, what our staff and workforce say, and I guess what we learn from outside, as you've mentioned in your report, Steve. Are we actually capturing that enough in terms of how do we embrace and value and learn and listen to those external and internal to the organisation?
Can we dead quick? I agree. So part of shifting culture is actively listening and encouraging us, listening to colleagues in the organisation and patients. Real-time feedback is a start, but it's a baby step start. So yes, absolutely agree, and it's something that we need to incorporate as part of the underpinning for those 6 strategic priorities. Yeah.
Very quickly, Maggie.
Sorry, Maggie Pavlo, non-exec, very quickly. Take us back just to something you said at the end, Kelly, which actually resonated with something Steve said in his report, which is around our plan and our management of our trajectory of where we're going is one thing, but actually that review of should we still be doing those actions is really important. And I think we've got to say no to some stuff. Not that it's not right to do, but just we don't have capacity, time, energy. And then it's not about not having the inclination. And would be to encourage us, yourselves, to do that review as quickly as possible, to be able to say, actually, yes, we can still do these things, but those things are going to have to go on the back burner for now, because otherwise we'll not deliver any of it, and we need to deliver the bits that are really important. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Maggie. I know we've spent quite a bit of time on that, but I think it was quite important. I wanted that to be the focus of what we were doing today. So we'll move on to breast improvement and the CQC, please, Jill.
Thank you, Alison. Jill Hunt, Chief Nurse. The paper talks about the work of breast services and the improvement programme and the progress that is being made. I'll touch upon the current service, the look back, and then touch on governance and engagement with patients and service users. So if I can start with the current service, you'll see in the paper that the outcome measures continue to be positive in terms of rates of breast conserving surgery, re-excision rates, and the offer of immediate reconstruction. In terms of the service provision, the cap has been increased to 90, with the aim of increasing to 100 in September. The current waiting times are 6 weeks, which is still too long, and so there's clearly a huge amount of focus in that area. We are doing some proactive planning during August around capturing the experience of women in our services currently, and we're working with some external agencies to help us with that. There's a whole public confidence piece, so we want to make sure we get independent views and some real qualitative feedback of what it feels like to be a patient in our services. We're also working with our expert by experience in cancer services to help us frame some of that experience work. We continue to work with Newcastle hospitals in our partnership model, and that's a real opportunity in terms of service resilience and workforce resilience moving forward. The paper touches on the Royal College of Surgeons and the Royal College of Radiology action plans, which we discussed through Quality Committee and other forums. From a Royal College of Surgeons perspective, there are I think 4 outstanding actions which largely focus on workforce job planning, development of specialist nurses and that future service model. And the Royal College of Radiology report that we received in March of this year, progress has been made, but there are still some outstanding actions around PACS optimisation that's detailed in the paper. The look back exercise, as board are aware, we are focusing on patients who received care between 2023 and February 2025, and that's a clinically recommended decision. Over 500 cases have been reviewed, and sadly 75 individuals met the threshold for duty of candour, which has been discharged in all but 3 cases where we're unable to make contact with patients despite multiple efforts. We have 9 reviewers currently, with another one being onboarded, so we have 10. We will have 10 reviewers. The pace of the progress is slower than we would want. What we're seeing is cases that need an oncology review, a radiology review, a surgical review. It isn't a straightforward audit process, and we are working with others to make sure we identify a stream of reviewers, because there will be a time limit to how long people want to do this, the review period, and clearly it will be more challenging in summer holidays and Christmas periods, so we absolutely need to continue with that. There is a paper been developed around options for the scale and the scope of the look back, and that is being socialised and sense checked with stakeholders, with staff, with clinical experts, and that will go through our governance processes with a recommendation. And that paper will adapt and respond to feedback that we're receiving along the way in terms of those conversations. From a governance perspective, the service has for a year now had refreshed governance processes in both radiology and in breast. Warren, as the Head of Assurance and Compliance, is going to be testing how robust that assurance is at speciality level by October of this year, to give us some assurance in that regard. We've also asked the Northern Cancer Alliance to test our effectiveness of MDT working. That was a criticism of multiple reports, and work has happened to strengthen the MDT, but we're going to get an external view on how effective that is. We continue, as many colleagues around the board table do, to meet and engage with patients who have been harmed in our services, and to offer support and signpost as much as we possibly can, acknowledging we can't change the harm that has happened, but trying to make sure we do all we can in terms of psychological support and ongoing support through pathways. And we continue to respond to media interest locally and nationally, which does continue to feature. I will pause there, but happy to take any questions, Alison.
Liz? Thanks, Jill. Liz Bromley, Ned. really great in terms of what we're doing and how we're looking back to learn from past mistakes. One of the things that's out there is a growing resentment for the impact of what we're having to do here on the other hospitals, and particularly in delay to cancer patients who can't get into the services at other places because of blah, blah, blah. And I just wonder whether under that last bit around communications, it might be worth having a communications plan that puts out there, you know, regret for the fact that this is having an effect outside of the hospital, but this is what we're doing and this is how we're working on it. Thank you.
Jill, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Liz. I think that's a really good point. I mean, we've done some communication with GPs around our increased cap and our service provision, but you're absolutely right. There's more that we need to do. I mean, I know from Matt's perspective, the communication with other providers is strong in terms of the planning, but it's perhaps the broader communication. I think that's a really good point. Thank you.
Do you want to comment on that, Matt?
Yeah, so Matt Graham, Chief Operating Officer. I think it's worth saying that while part of the issue for the increased waiting times across the region is due to the loss of capacity in our service, actually when we've done the work with the Northern Cancer Alliance, at least an equal proportion is due to just an increase in breast referrals across the patch. So everybody is short of capacity, even if we had our full capacity that we had these incidents happening, we would still be short across the patch, and we're working that through.
That's
with those
probably part of the
organisations.
message then, because the perception is not that, and it's dealing with the perception that matters. So that argument is a good one. Phil.
Phil Kane, Non-Executive Director. Just following on from the capacity issue. As I read the paper, we've increased capacity to 90 patients per week, and we're going up to 100 per week next month. But we're only getting 70 to 80 referrals per week at present. I'm not seeing any change in that. Hopefully we would if we improve communications. But at the moment, as you said, Jill, the average waiting time is 6 weeks. If we were to bring back referrals up to 100 per week, what's the knock-on effect on our waiting times?
So the knock-on, if we get back to the 90 to and then 100 referrals per week, then we're not eating into our backlog. So at the moment we're eating into the backlog, and while I think actually between this paper being written and now the waiting time has come down again, and the number of patients in sort of waiting beyond the expected time has come down. If referrals start going up again, then our ability to do that will reduce. The challenge we've got is that, as Liz said, patients in other providers are waiting sort of similar times to that. So as our waiting times come down, the chances are that patients will then decide to might start to come up to us because our waiting times are better. So again, that's part of the conversation we're having with the Northern Cancer Alliance and the other trusts about trying to manage that so we don't suddenly have short waiting times and other trusts have longer ones. So it's managing that across the whole system as well as internally within the trust.
I'm going to take Lisa, Adam, David, and then we need to move on. Lisa.
Thank you, Alison. Lisa Quinn, Non-Executive Director. Again, Jill, thank you very much for the report. And you probably know what I'm going to say, but I am a little bit worried about things falling between programmes. So I have mentioned on a number of occasions the need to be assured that we're learning from the breast services programme across the organisation. So things we find out here, how do we share that learning across? I had understood that was part of this programme, but it's not sitting in the programme areas of responsibility within the paper. Jill, you've kindly provided to me before how we are learning from it and how that is being shared across the organisation, but I don't see it sitting between these two programmes. So for me, I'm looking for some clarity about how we can assure ourselves that we are learning from the breast services outside breast services. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that now, or at some...
I guess just a reflection that a lot of the learning from breast is reflected in our well-led CQC findings. Albury is reflective across many parts of the organisation. The work around strengthening how we escalate risk, how we listen to colleagues who speak up and respond. So I think about how we can explicitly link that together, but I think there's a lot of learning that is just, perhaps it's implicit in other programmes rather than explicit. So, but it's a good point, and we can make sure those connections are much clearer.
Adam.
Adam Crampton, Non-Exec Director. One observation, one question. To Steve's earlier point, when we were talking about CQC, where we can both celebrate and not be comfortable where we are, I think we do need to celebrate some of the results that we're seeing from the clinical quality standards, particularly around the breast conserving surgery re-excision rates and immediate reconstruction, which are now all continuing to exceed national standards. And that is no mean feat from where we've been to where we are. So whilst we can not be happy about a lot of the work in the programme, that is something we must celebrate. The second point is a question, Jill, is around, we talk in the paper around patient engagement still being designed, robust patient engagement that informs the programme and also the recovery plan. This far into the programme, are we comfortable that we're still not there with our patient engagement, informing our plans robustly?
Thank you. I think we've focused on patient engagement from women who have been harmed in our care, and there's an awful lot of work happening with that group of patients. In the service, we found it's been quite difficult to engage, which is why we're changing our approach. We're doing the usual stuff that we do around patient experience more broadly. We're talking about doing some of our real-time feedback there, but there's just a sense of we need to get some colleagues to help us, because there's still a trust piece and people feeling open and able. So it isn't that work hasn't been happening, but I just don't think we've quite got it right. So I think we're pausing and thinking we need a different approach.
David.
David Jackson, Non-Exec Director. I think Phil and Adam have covered the points in terms of the capacity and in celebrating some of the successes that we're having, but thank you.
Great, thank you. Jill, can we move on to the CQC?
Thank you, Alison. I will attempt not to duplicate either previous reports or future reports, but just to touch on where we are from a CQC perspective. We've already talked about the 3 reports that have been published. We have had an inspection of nuclear medicine at the UHMD site, an IRMA inspection on the 13th of July. It's a different type of inspection. It's a one-day inspection with a really quick turnaround for a draft report which we have received. The visit was largely positive. We had no enforcement actions. We had one area for improvement that we had highlighted to the team before they visited around implementing the carer and comforter support policy, which is in train and will be implemented by the end of September. And then there were 2 areas for improvement. One was around managing what are national shortages of expertise in medical physics, and the model that we have in place is across multiple providers and mitigates that risk. And the second was around some of our historic training records for staff who've worked for a long time, moving them into a newer system. So again, actions relatively easy to progress, but the visit was positive, and the team were really pleased with the feedback they received. I will just touch upon the 2 warning notices for surgery and well-led, and I think it's fair to say that we're now in the process of looking at our overarching CQC improvement plan and also how we integrate into our broader improvement plan. But in terms of the warning notices, I'll just touch on the outstanding areas. So from a surgical perspective, 110 of 121 actions have been delivered, and you can see in the paper areas where we still have progress to make. We've put deadlines in terms of when those actions will be complete. There's a real piece in the refreshed action plan around, and what is the outcome? What are we measuring? We've done this training, we've done this input. What's the outcome for patients and our clinical areas? In terms of the well-led, again, we've highlighted the areas of training that we need to improve compliance in. And we've touched upon the governance around antimicrobial resistance, which I will talk about in the infection prevention and control paper. Later on in the agenda, the IQPR will be working its way through the next committee structure, which again was an action in the well-led. We've got speciality governance. I think that's an area that we need to do more work to focus on embedding and making sure it functions as we would expect. And you know, we've put some deadlines in around that, but I think that's going to continue to be a work in progress. We are working on the bundle of quality documents that are associated with the IQPR, so the quality assurance framework, the quality risk profile, the accountability framework for the end of September. So we'll have that bundle of quality documents. Complaints and incidents remain an area of challenge. Again, I'll touch upon them in the patient experience paper. The well-led rightly highlighted concerns around open incidents and open complaints. And at the time of writing the paper, we'd made a 65% reduction in open complaints, overdue complaints, and a 70% reduction in overdue incidents, with literally a daily focus. And I think it probably comes back, Alison, then to the point around embedding and sustaining. I think it's clear that that isn't the case because it's needing daily focus to manage that process. The paper details the approach to risk management, which has largely been led by Warren, and the risk and compliance group, which meets monthly, is executive-led, is becoming embedded. The refresh of the board assurance framework and the new risk management policy. I think the paper also shows some green shoots that all of the training is starting to have an impact, because you can see risks that are being managed are being escalated at speciality level, which is, you know, one of the really positive features of this work. And certainly in the board assurance visits and other visits, people are talking about risk more broadly than I think they would have done before. In terms of, I've touched upon the overarching CQC improvement plan and how that needs to feature. And we're looking at a thematic approach. There are 10 themes with underpinning actions, and as I say, the design is really focusing on what is it we're trying to achieve, because that's what we should be testing out, and that's certainly what the CQC will test out when they visit us. And also looking to strengthen the governance process around the improvement plan, and how are we assured that actions have had the desired effect. And if we close actions down, where are they being monitored as business as usual? So that detailed work is happening this week and next week. Kelly and I have got some sort of workshop time to try and map all of that out. So we'll be able to bring that through Quality Committee and other committees. So I'll pause there, Alison, and take any questions.
Great. Thanks, Jill. Any questions on any of that? Look, I think it's really important that we spent the time that we have spent on those last 3 items. I think that we need to note what we've done so far and the progress we've made. Sometimes it's very difficult when you're in the here and now to recognise the good work that we've done in the last few months, but also to recognise the amount of work we have to do moving forward. Some of that's about embedding what we've already done, but some of it's moving the dial on a lot of other issues as well. So. But good to recognise it. I think we need to keep an absolute focus on whether what we said we'd do is actually now, in the context that we're in, the right thing to be doing. Do we need to move our priorities somewhere else? But I think as a board, we're very well aware of that conversation. So I want to move on to our core assurance. We're running a bit behind time, so I'm going to do the AAA reports and ask the chairs to try and keep that to the items that we really need to know about. We've all read the reports themselves, and then we'll have a break before we do the IQPR. So I'm going to do quality, people, finance, audit. So over to you, Adam. Adam, you just switched your mic off.
It's better that way. Adam Crampson, Exec Director and Chair of Quality Committee. So there's 2 reports there for 2 quality committees, June and July. They're the 2 alerts to bring forward. The first one is on temporary escalation space, the use of temporary escalation space, the appropriate use of it, and our exit strategy, which we are not assured at the time of the meeting around how we will be exiting the use of that. This straddles both Quality Committee and Finance and Performance, as we know that the use of temporary escalation space is an outcome of our flow issues. So Matt is kindly working across both committees on the reporting of that, both from a clinical quality perspective and on an improvement in our flow through the hospital. The second is on duty of candour. This reporting on duty of candour has not been routinely coming to board and to committee as it should. It's fair to say that when it did come to committee for the first time, we were not happy with where we were from our duty of candour response rates being at around 53% within target timescales, which means that for 47% of the time we were not contacting patients and families in an appropriate time frame when there was a need to. So there'll be an increased level of focus on that. The only other thing I'm going to pull out from the report is from an Assure perspective, and it comes back to Alison's point at the start around, are things working with our plans? You know, we had a significant issue with healthcare associated infections at the start of our improvement journey many months ago. It was really pleasing to see, and we'll see it in Jill's report later on in the agenda, that we are seeing some significant improvements relating to infection prevention control. Some real good call-outs there around antimicrobial stewardship, which we know has a large impact on those infections that we see associated with hospitals. We are now exceeding our targets in that space alongside the action planning for reducing healthcare associated infections. Ultimately, that's good for patients, but also shows that we're starting to get a grip on the absolute fundamental standards that we require at ward level.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions for Adam on those AAAs? No, thank you, Adam. Hand over to Maggie.
Maggie Pavlov, non-exec and chair of this committee. I'm pleased to say that we've not put anything in alert, which seems weird when we know that we're so far behind in a few things, but we haven't put it in alert because we know where we are. And what we've decided as a committee, and it's the first point in under advise, is that we took a decision right at the beginning of the committee to acknowledge that we are a little off where we need to be. We've had changes at leadership in terms of the people function, and we have a plan to get a plan. So rather than putting it in alert as in this board needs to do something about stuff, actually this particular board doesn't. We need to do something, and I think there'll be quite a lot stays in advise while we work through where we're at. So just to highlight a couple of things in advise, which I wouldn't normally do, but the three main areas are obviously about culture, about sexual safety, that remains a high concern for us, and then the ongoing work that's being done around sickness absence and workforce reduction plan. They are in progress, all of them, so they're there as advisory. That we're not there yet, but we understand the trajectory. The other thing to highlight from the advice section is under the 10-point plan. The point was made very accurately that it's important that we get this right from the resident doctors, but actually equally important that all of the sensible things that you should be doing for the resident doctors, we ideally should be doing for all of our people. And it's just how we actually square that circle, but on with that. Everything else is self-explanatory. I think the only two things under Assure that I'd like to mention, the Guardian of Safe Working presented a very eloquent and very reassuring and assuring report. It just couldn't go to fully assured because there was just an inability to get a little bit of data that was a national issue, not our issue. Otherwise, that would have actually been presented for full assurance. So it was really comforting to see that. And the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian report was very concise, was very full, and what we're now looking to do is to make sure that that is triangulated, as been mentioned previously here, to really make sure that things aren't duplicated and that things don't go to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian when they should be going somewhere else, and that we do try and retain that focus on patient safety. Equally, it's good to see that people are using that as a method if they don't think they can take things anywhere else. So they're getting lots from the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. Moving forward, I'd like to see less going to them and more going to other routes, but for now, it's serving a good purpose.
Questions for Maggie or any of that? No, Maggie, thank you. I'll hand back to Adam, who's going to do our finance performance.
Thank you. So we've got two reports in here for finance and performance, June and July. The alert I'll pull out from the June committee that moves position significantly in July was around the productivity and efficiency. So at the time of the June meeting, we had little assurance around the risk-adjusted gap on the 28 million gap on the CRP programmes. I would say that between the June meeting and the July meeting, a significant amount of work had been done and has been done, and I'm pleased to say in the July meeting we felt somewhat more assured that we had a handle on that gap, albeit, as Steve mentioned at the start, still at quite a high-risk plan, particularly towards the back end of the year and the delivery of those recurring schemes. The next, switching screens, the next alert that I will bring up is around the referral to treatment elective care waiting list, which Steve mentioned at the start in his report. Although there's been a significant amount of activity, the waiting list has not decreased, and in fact has actually grown throughout the year. At the time of the committee, we didn't have a clear rationale as to why that was the case, despite the activity that was happening, and that we've asked for further assurance and further information to come back to the next committee, which Matt will be providing to us, on what are the drivers for that and what are we doing around that. Is this just we are getting a higher level of demand on top of the work we have, or is there more behind the scenes we need to be doing to improve our waiting list position? And the final one, because this has been bubbling along in advisory boxes, but is now in the alert box, is around potential missing follow-ups. So back to the earlier point that was made in one of the reports around the IQPR and the level of data that's now been surfaced has allowed us to see that there was over 100,000 patients in multiple different work streams that were potentially missing to follow-ups or not having active follow-ups logged against them within the EPR. As a result of that, we don't have full assurance on where they are in that journey, how we're following up, what waiting list should those patients be on, and then a referral that I made to myself, the Quality Committee, is how do we assure ourselves that we are looking at the potential harm and any risk of harm that sits within there. So for the next committee, we're going to have far more information around the different categorisations and what's being done to alleviate that issue.
Great, Adam. Any questions for Adam on that? No? Thank you, Adam. I'll hand over to Lisa.
Thank you. Lisa Quinn, Non-Exec Director and Chair of the Audit Committee. So 1AAA covering both the June and the July meeting. The June meeting was predominantly procedural. We covered a lot of the annual reports. But I was really pleased, and it's covered in the Assure section, we were able, in this challenged period, to hit the deadlines around the annual report, annual accounts, and to have meaningful quality priorities going into the quality account for the following year. So again, just really want to acknowledge the significant work done by the management team to get to that point in the timescales that we had to deliver in. So I highlight those. 3 areas in the alert, but I want to give you a bit of an update, if I can, Chair, on those areas. So I'm going to start with the risk register assurance. Obviously, I'm highlighting here in the alert section that at the point of the committee, we still need to understand how we gain assurance about the meaningful engagement with our frontline leaders, our wards and teams. And this is on the backdrop of an enormous amount of work being done on risk management. I was really pleased to see, though, in Jill's report and in the CQC update, that we're looking to put in place in August a process that actually will gain that assurance from that process. So I guess just to connect those 2 reports to say that raising this in July, management have taken action and they're putting a process in place for August. Similarly, when we talk about the internal audit overdue actions, we have seen quite a deterioration in the overdue actions from internal audit. I know the management team have been discussing this, and I have had reassurance at this stage from our Director of Finance that learning will be coming and good practice from another organisation and being implemented in the coming months. The committee hasn't seen that implementation yet, so again, just highlighting to the board and see until we see the impact of that. The final one for me remains outstanding, and it's something I'll pick up later, possibly. I know Elliot, it's day 3, but this was an outstanding action between Board Secretary and Medical Director. We just need to understand from an audit perspective how we are following up the exercise from the counterfold point of view. So pick that up separately. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Lisa, any questions? No, thank you. Okay, thank you for those AAAs. They set the scene for what will be our next item after the break, which is the Integrated Quality Performance Report. But we'll take a 5-minute break now and come back just after 5 past. Okay, welcome back everyone. We're going to now deal with item 10, the Integrated Quality Performance and Workforce Update. Matt, please.
Thank you, Chair. Matt Graham, Acting Chief Operating Officer. So in terms of operational performance, I'll start with, I'll briefly go through each section. Obviously, a lot has been covered probably already in some of the AAA reports. So in terms of urgent emergency care, last month in June, our performance did decline to 76.2% with an increase in 12-hour waits. When we've looked at in detail at it, you can see a sort of clear drop in performance during the heat wave period, which we are digging into to try and understand. So while you can maybe understand why that might have happened, that's not necessarily in all organisations across the region. So we need to understand what drove that for us and what other organisations are doing to prevent that. In terms of improvements, I think it's important to recognise that a lot of the work we've talked about in some of the AAAs, like the work around reducing the temporary escalation spaces, improving flow, and Steve mentioned winter planning in his report. We're bringing all that together into one programme effectively, because it's all linked together. Effectively, we need to do 5 things. So we're working on alternatives to admission and alternative routes of admission into the trust, so everything doesn't go through ED. We've got work to do on processes within ED. If we're going to not have fewer temporary escalation spaces, we need to reduce length of stay. So there's a range of things that we're doing to look at reducing length of stay. And then there's the issue around the arrival of patients into ED and the availability of beds in the day. So sorting out, bringing those discharges forward earlier. And the final piece then is the bed reconfiguration that we're doing. When we've looked at our utilisation of beds across the trust, we know that we have too many surgical beds and not enough medical beds. So we're doing over the next few months, we'll be reconfiguring the beds across the hospitals to rebalance that and give us sort of beds in the right places. In terms of RTT, again, has been highlighted in the AAA report. Our performance decreased to 65.5% in June. And we have started to see some patients waiting over 65 weeks. Those are predominantly in dermatology and general surgery. We had a particular issue in dermatology with the way patients were being booked, which we've now rectified, but that has left us with a legacy of some patients waiting longer than we would like them to. In terms of the work we're doing, the theatre productivity work continues to go well. The average cases per list is increasing. And we've just implemented in July a new theatre timetable, which is ensuring that we're allocating the right number of sessions to the right specialties. In terms of outpatients, I think there's probably more we can do in this area, and probably some things that would be worth bringing to the board's attention. But we are on to the second round of review of the clinic templates to look for increases in capacity there. Also looking at how we can increase utilisation within those clinics. And there's a lot of work we're starting at the moment around the single point of access, which is a sort of nationally mandated piece of work to look at how we can triage patients and ensure that we're getting the right patients into outpatients. In response to some of the challenges we've had with performance on RTT, I've initiated some work with 9 key specialties, which are the ones which seem to be driving some of the issues in our performance. I'll be meeting with those specialties at the end of August and early September to really dig into what's happening in those areas. I think as Steve mentioned, cancer is probably a positive. So our 28-day faster diagnosis standard increased to 66.9% in May, and our 31-day performance was above the national standard at 96%, and our 62-day performance was maintained at 70%. In some of our key cancer tumour groups that we know we need to focus on, we've seen some good improvements. So in skin, they're achieving the 28-day faster diagnosis standard, and we're seeing some improvements in breast. We know we've got work to do still in colorectal and lung in particular. In terms of diagnostics, although our activity in diagnostics is increasing, we did see a slight decrease in our performance to 82%. Key areas for improvement are MRI, where we've got a lot of work to do on demand management and what we offer to GPs in terms of direct access, as well as looking at how we can increase capacity. And the second area in particular is non-obstetric ultrasound. We've got plans in place for September when we'll have some new equipment which will allow our podiatry service to do non-obstetric ultrasound themselves, which will increase capacity significantly. And then the final thing I wanted to mention was potential missing follow-ups. So as Adam mentioned, this is an area of concern. There's a huge amount of work going on in all the specialties, and I've been talking to all of them, and it's very clear they are focusing on this. However, that work isn't yet having the impact on the numbers that we wanted to. I met with them this morning before the board, and we agreed that approach that Adam mentioned of making sure this is clinically led and a combination of all our clinicians and their secretaries working through this. And we're going to look at some metrics which will allow us to see the improvements around the length of time that patients are waiting, but also the sort of profile of that list, so that what we're seeing is we'd expect to see some patients having a short period of time on that list, but not a long tail. So we'll define some metrics which will help us understand that we're reducing the risk in those areas. So that's, I think, all I want to say on performance. I'm happy to take questions there. I can hand over to Jill to cover the staffing element of this paper.
Should we just take a pause there? Is that Phil's hand up? Yes, Phil.
Phil Kane, non-exec. Can I be greedy and ask 3 questions? First is the service level agreement that you're negotiating with Sunderland for neurophysiology. Is that to deliver services on site here, or will that require patients to go to Sunderland, and what are the implications for travelling for our population?
So it's for patients to go to Sunderland. That agreement's in place, or that work is in place now. So patients are going to Sunderland, and while there's a small number of patients on the performance report who appear to have waited over 60 weeks for those, they are all now have been to Sunderland, and that was an error in the data, so they're all with Sunderland now.
Right. So it does have implications.
It does have implications
for our population to travel.
Yeah.
So does that include patients who live down here travelling to Sunderland or Bishop, or is that patients from the northern part of the patch?
I think patients from the southern part will go to South Tees, but let me check that for you.
Okay, so thank you. Second one, which is one of my pet hobby horses, the lung cancer pathway. You've got a number of patients who are waiting over 104 days, which is just too long. Do we know why?
So that pathway, as we said, that pathway goes into either the RVI or into James Cook, and it's that combination of between us and them. So there are some delays for us in terms of the 28-day fast diagnosis, but the majority of the delays are into the treatment element of the pathway.
If I can follow up on that, so do we chase those patients who are waiting in those trusts and finding out why they're not getting treated on time?
Yeah, absolutely, and we do harm reviews on all of those patients so that we understand where they are and what's happening with them.
Okay, and then the final one is with relation to ward reconfiguration. You decrease the number of surgical beds, you increase the number of medical. What are the implications for training of junior medical staff and ward cover? Because surgical F1s will not be covering medical wards. It's a training issue.
Yeah. So it hasn't affected the medical staffing for surgery, so they're still covering, the junior doctors are still the same for surgery, and I still have wards to cover, but just fewer beds. Right. And the medical staffing, we've worked that through, and that allows us to cover the wards that we need. One of the reasons for doing the ward configuration was around medical staffing for the ward at Bishop Auckland, which isn't great, and this allows us to improve it by bringing it back to Darlington.
Okay, so there are no implications for training?
Not as far as I'm aware. Nobody's raised that as an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Maggie?
Maggie Pavlo, Non-Exec Director. I have two questions. One probably a bit more complicated. In relation to waiting lists, how easy do we make it for patients to communicate with their consultant or their consultant secretary so that they know where they are? You know, while the waiting lists are reducing, if that's you and you are not being seen, how easy is it, and can we make it even easier? Is my first question. And then my second question, unrelated, is about the heat. Did I understand you correctly? I appreciate you said you're doing work to investigate. Was that because our people were off, our teams, our people were off as a result of the hot weather, or because more people were coming into hospital because of the hot weather?
Okay, thank you. So I'll take the first question. So one of the things that we know we need to do is better communication with patients around their waiting. I think that's one of the policy documents from NHS England recently about how we do that, and I think that's an area we could definitely improve. Patients will get a phone number that they can ring for the secretary, but how easy that is to access, I think there's something more about us being proactive about their waiting time and what they can be doing and where they are in the queue. It's probably not as easy to do, but if you're waiting for your Amazon parcel, you know exactly where you are and how it happens, and we could do the same in terms of just it being more, giving people more information about where they are in the queue and recognising that they understand that process and how long they're likely to wait and things. So I think there's a lot more we need to do in that space. In terms of the impact of the heat, I think it was. I don't think it was that people were off sick from our side in that period. There was a change in demand, and we sort of clearly saw more people with heat stroke and things like that coming in. But it's not clear what drove that drop, if I'm honest, and that's what we're trying to dig into. And as I say, other organisations didn't see that drop in the same way, but it's very clear when you look at the data that basically when the heat started on sort of the performance dropped, and then at the beginning of July when it sort of cooled down a bit, performance improved again. So whether it's the environment that people are working in or what, I don't know yet.
Elliot
Sykes, Chief Medical Officer. It's a question about outpatients, I guess, as much to the board as Matt, and how much emphasis we are and should place on overall model transformation, both for Performance Now, the safety point about follow-up lists, because yes, we need to fix the now, but I probably strongly believe that overall model transformation will significantly contribute to the now, the follow-up list, whilst contributing to clinical strategy, integration with primary care, etc.
Steve?
The short answer to that question is we absolutely need to put the focus on there. So we've done, I think, Elliot, to be fair, lots of the focus has been on kind of the nuts and bolts of how we manage capacity, booking, what central appointments do, what secretaries do. Some of the work from around the rest of the region, there's an enormous opportunity for us to improve using the single point of access type model. And I think we've got some enthusiasts in Jen Steele and others, so I think we need to make sure we've got an eye on the transformation. I guess for board colleagues generally, we've dipped our toe in the water with a partnership with Isla, which is focused on digital pathways in dermatology initially, but there's an awful lot of opportunity for us to do a lot more.
Thank you. Jill?
Thank you, Jill Hunt, Chief Nurse. I think the other thing to build on is if we look at our complaints, there's a significant proportion that are associated with non-inpatient care and access and appointments. So I think there's much more we need to do to improve the experience of people who are waiting. So I think it's a really good point.
Thank you, Matt. Jill, do you want to take up safe staffing?
Thank you, Alison. I'll be brief. We take all our safe staffing papers through People and Culture Committee and obviously have a detailed discussion. So we've brought a summary here of the fill rates, care hours per patient day, the most recent report. the vast majority of our areas, when you look at all of the metrics, would be considered green, with the exception of our maternity wards at UHND, which have had a challenging, I guess, 6 to 8 weeks, largely driven by increase in sickness levels. Kim, when she talks about gives an update in maternity services, we'll talk about all of the mitigation put in place to ensure safety, but it has been a challenging time in their areas of concern that we would we have noted and taken action. But more broadly, we've got systems and processes on a daily basis to oversee staffing across our inpatient areas.
Adam Crampson, Non-Exec Director. Just on that point, Jill, and I know we'll come on to in maternity, and I'm going to be a slight pedant, which is not my nature. Your report states that it is amber, but in the written report, but the actual safe staffing report is reported red, and that is a discrepancy. That's the pedantry point, but the actual point that falls out of that is that we talk about the mitigation around the management of that safe staffing level on the maternity wards, being the use of the director of midwifery, the heads of midwifery, specialist nurses stepping into clinical roles, actual delivery roles. How sustainable is that, and when does that become a point of not being sustainable, therefore requires an urgent board escalation?
Thanks, Adam. I'll take the 2 points. So the first point, you're absolutely right. We've got the summary slides there, and the bigger, broader report has it as amber. But you're absolutely right to note that, and it is an area of concern. In terms of the sustainability of the actions, they are short-term, immediate actions to make the service safe. The sickness level was 14%, so we had to take immediate steps. There is clearly a longer-term piece around reducing sickness levels. We are, looking at, we're currently undertaking a birth rate plus, so looking at are our establishments fit for the current patient group that we're caring for. So there's a much broader piece. So in answer to your question, it's not sustainable, but it's a short-term mitigation to shore up the service and make safe. And Kim will touch upon, we've also done some work to, we've put a triage helpline at the Darlington site for both sites to take some of the pressure off the UHND. So there's a whole suite of metrics measures that we've taken in the short term while we work through the longer term piece. The sickness has slightly improved in the last couple of weeks, but there's more to do.
Can I come back on that?
If I may, just briefly, and part of that question, Jill, was just around what constitutes a real rapid alert to the board, because it's not a sustainable situation. We've got temporary mitigations in place as described. What's the threshold of untenable board escalation?
Sorry, thanks Adam. Kim Williams, Director of Midwifery, nice to meet you. So yes, you're quite right, we have had a significant amount of short and long-term sickness that we've seen. It started to dip around about May, so prior to that the national standard's 85% staffing acuity, which you would signify as safe staffing. We were 94%, and I've put some SPC charts in to show the trajectory of where the staffing starts to drop. In UHND in May, it's dropped to 80, but that's not significant. And towards the end of May, going into June, we dropped down to 73%, which is where we started to see some of the challenges in the area. It's a really challenging place to work at the moment in terms of the Ockenden report and AMOS report. Staff are really frightened to work in maternity services. We had a couple of MOS signals that came through in May. What we identified was that staff are starting to go off sick when they're involved in an incident, so that psychological safety and that support on the shop floor clearly is not in place as firmly as we'd like it to be, so that we put the wraparound support in immediately to prevent the staff going home, not feeling supported and going off sick and having subsequent impact. Some of the mitigations that we put in place wasn't just ourselves but the specialist midwives, which it is within their portfolio to be working regular clinical shifts. It helps with their clinical credibility. I've paused the rotation, so we have a whole load of midwives who perhaps haven't worked in the intrapartum areas for quite a significant length of time, and we were rotating them at a time when your staffing levels drop. You can't support that stasis, so by stopping that and pausing that rotation and putting people back into the areas that they are comfortable with, that has increased the staffing levels from 8s up to 11s and 15s, which is our template. So we've seen an immediate increase already. We'd gone out to recruitment for our home birth services, and as you know, we were due to roll our home birth service out on the 10th of August, and we've just done a quality impact assessment onto the safety as to whether that's feasible, which will come to board. But we've recruited staff members and they work from the MLUs. The MLUs are on the labour wards and they've already started in work, so we've increased our numbers of staffing coming through. We're also out to recruitment as well, because we've been able to recruit to 8 whole-time equivalents above because of our significant numbers of maternity leave across the service. We've put a 24-hour roster on senior leadership team so that we're there to support the staff, to help with some of the decision making as well. So we've not just increased our visibility from a senior level, we've also increased the numbers of staff that we've brought in to work within the labour ward setting as well. And we've increased our oversight around sickness and absence clinics, helping people to return to work sooner. Thank you.
That's probably quite a nice segue into our next item. But I'll just take a question from Rob.
Yes, so the question maybe we can take offline, but sorry, Rob Clark, Financial Improvement Director, and representing Hayley, CFO. The fill rates are where they're flagging as red. When you sort of compare that to occupancy, that doesn't actually flag as red. Am I reading that incorrectly, or is that fill rates based on occupancy or fill rates in terms of total number of beds?
Jill.
Thank you. So the fill rate is against the establishment on the roster. So we put the bed occupancy there because the fill rate may flag. This isn't in maternity services, more broadly. The fill rate might flag, and then you look and it's been 40% occupied. So actually the staffing has been sufficient for the patients that are there. So that, I think it's useful context.
Can I also follow up then? Because actually I'd look at this from the other way around, where we've got almost 200% staff fill rates on wards that are much lower occupancy. So that would be more of a concern for me, because actually the fill rates are pretty aligned to the occupancy, and probably need to look at those where we're over supplying staff, particularly in healthcare support workers.
Yeah, just in response to that, I think the fill rate doesn't account for acute independency. So you may have wards that are over-established for healthcare support workers because of the dependency of that cohort of patients at a time. Could I just come back in terms of the trigger for board? I think there isn't a magic number. It's much more about a broader set of metrics and outcomes and what we're looking at. And we have met regularly in the last few weeks to look at all of the above, and is it sustainable, or do we need to do something differently? So we are comfortable with the measures we've put in place are having the desired impact in the short term, but there isn't a number that we say actually that's the number. It's much more about outcomes and staff coming back from sickness and the measures that have been put in place. And as Kim said, she had staff who were rotating on a supernumerary basis. Well, we would just bring them back in. They're sort of standard things to do.
Thank you. I think we'll draw a line under the that topic in terms of noting where we are in terms of performance against those various different topics and headings, and I think that they're very much being driven by the committees and the focus on those. And we'll move on to the medical and nursing update. So I'm going to hand over to Jill in a minute just to introduce the maternity one. You'll hear from Kim, but you'll also hear from Phil as our maternity safety champion. It'll be verbal this time, but we're looking to bring a report from the maternity safety champion to board on a regular basis in the future. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Alison. So Kim will take us through the key areas for consideration. We have already in the Chief Exec's report touched upon the fact that we are moving into the intensive support from the McNeo programme nationally, which is a positive in terms of where we are. Kim will talk about the 4 maternity outcome signal system alerts that we've had during May and June, and as board recalls we haven't had any previous alerts, so it's been in recent months. I was going to highlight the staffing issues which we've touched upon, and I think Kim will probably talk about some of the work around culture and a real need for us to strengthen multi-professional working and leadership. So I will hand over to Kim to take us through that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, as well. I'll take the paper as read and I'll bring through the high-level detail. Talking about in the alert section our perinatal mortality rates. We've been keeping a close eye on perinatal mortality since I came to the organisation. We identified the outlier from an Embrace perspective in 2023 and 2024, which was published just at the beginning of the year, and we've gone out for external review to look to see. We already have our PMRT process where we review our mortality rates using a robust tool. However, it's important that you get externality, and if you get a pattern that you go for an external review. We've done that, so that's a really positive element. In terms of our mortality, we are just below the Embrace rate at the moment. We've seen a slight rise in stillbirth rates at Darlington Memorial Hospital. That's a slight rise above the Embrace rates, but just to note that stillbirths are babies that are born with no signs of life from 24 weeks gestation. We do pull all of the learning, and that comes through in the quarterly perinatal mortality review tool report that you've received as an appendix for any questions, please. I've also included within the pack today the new National Board report. What we want to bring is a really clear explanation of where we are in terms of where we've been, where we are, and where we measure against national ambitions as a maternity service, so that it's very, very clear for executives, non-executives and our councillors where we are in a trajectory, any areas where there are levels of escalation that need to be picked up and identified. I will take feedback on that National Board report, but I think it provides a much clearer element of where we are as a service without all the words that you will receive within the report. That was born from Quality Committee. Adam picked up that there were lots of words in the maternity papers because we have to provide maternity incentive scheme, perinatal quality oversight, and any outlying metrics from a heat map perspective and from the maternity dashboard. So I went away and looked in other trusts to see how they were presenting, but just as luck might have it, the national team brought out this report. So you'll see that that'll be much clearer and hopefully be able to point you in the right direction as to the red flags, the delays, and where we need to put quality improvement projects within the service. I won't touch on anything else in terms of the action plan around staffing because I think we've covered that, and I will take any questions on that. Some of the areas that we've seen some improvements in actually, and an assurance that is important and pivotal when it comes to maternity, is that from a regional perspective, that heat map looking at 22 metrics within the region, we are still classified as a good service. We have definitely got elements where we need to improve, but if you can see some of our clinical outcome metrics, you've seen a reduction in postpartum hemorrhage rates, APGAR scoring, breastfeeding rates, water births, for example, and our admissions for mothers and babies back into the unit, and term admissions for the babies going into the neonatal unit. So they're all positive metrics. From an advice perspective, we've had a lot of national publications, and all of the national publications are aimed to provide quality assurance within maternity services and improve what we do at every element within that. The 10-point plan that was born from Amos and Ockenden, I've started to do a gap analysis on that. We're making a really good trajectory towards our improvements against the 10-point plan. Again, that's coming to Quality Committee in August to show the trajectory that we're making on some of the gaps in the service. We've had the maternal care bundle. The maternal care bundle is aimed to reduce maternal morbidity and mortality. That's a national ambition sitting within the maternity incentive scheme, with 5 particular elements to be fully embedded and implemented by March 2027. We've only just started, it was just published in June, but I think it's important to note that we've started the meetings, we have got work stream leads for each of the elements, and we will start to bring through a trajectory of our progress within the maternal care bundle. Within the AMOS plan as well, the national maternity triage specification has been born. Maternity triage is our A&E. It's where families come through who have comorbidities or there's abnormalities or deviations, so they might have reduced movements, for example. We've automatically improved our maternity triage access. We are one of the better ones in the region in terms of RAG rating our families coming through and seeing them within 15 minutes of assessment. We've allocated telephone triage at Darlington Memorial Hospital, so all of our calls go to Darlington, who are richer in staff and have more experienced staff working at Darlington, and that's really helped take the pressure off Durham, and that works beautifully, and I pinched that from another organisation, Pinch with Pride. We've brought that in, we trialled it, it's working beautifully and it's taken the pressure off, so all our triage calls are coming through Darlington with expert clinical midwives answering the phone. I've increased the escalation pathways within that area as well, and we've arranged for service user voice to come into the area to walk through to see what the experience for our service users are. We've relocated, thanks to Steve and executive team for helping us get this over the line, but our PAU is now at the bottom of our labour ward. What that means is we have oversight from the Band 7 coordinators who hold responsibility for the unit outside of hours and also of a weekend. They're able to see if it's getting busy within the triage area and provide immediate support without having to leave the labour ward. What that's also meant is it's opened up capacity on the antenatal and postnatal ward, so we have 6 additional beds, and that's really helped with our induction of labours because we're able to use 1 bay of 4 to put 1 midwife in with 4 ladies undergoing induction of labour, and they're not spread out everywhere, with lots of equipment in the right place with the right midwife at the right time, so that's really helped with the capacity as well. We've also received funding for a full-time equality, diversity, inequality and improvement matron, and that matron is starting to look at our communities, the populations that we serve. We know we've got high deprivation rates in the deciles 1 to 3 in Durham, so she's starting to look at the data of the families accessing our care to make sure that our service is fit for purpose for the families that we're serving. So we're trying to bring in quality improvement projects to improve public health in that department as well. And from a Year 8 maternity incentive scheme, there are some elements within this paper to show the trajectory and improvement against each of the 6 safety actions within the maternity incentive scheme for declaration in the minutes if it's approved today. Thank you. If I just go on to the signals, some of the signals that we have received, it's important to note that we hadn't received any signals. The MOS signals are the Maternity Outcome Signal System, born from the East Kent report, and it's about early intervention and recognising potential safety concerns with intrapartum care. So if you start to double up on your term stillbirths or your term neonatal deaths, it triggers immediately at a 95% interval or 99% interval. We hadn't received any at all, and we were doing really well as a service. And then in May we received 2 signals, and then we received 2 signals in June. 3 signals were at UHND, 1 signal was at Darlington Memorial. Now the first signal that we did an MDT and a critical safety checklist with external people on for their oversight as well, so we're not marking our own homework. We identified a complication with the induction of labour guideline. I brought that to the attention of executive colleagues, and we worked on the guideline to put immediate improvements in place to improve the outcomes for our families accessing care. There were other elements within that guideline that required an MDT. So 2 of the poor outcomes or the perinatal deaths that we experienced from those 4 signals were aligned to the induction of labour guideline. There were some elements, not specific learning for maternity services from the other cases, but there's always an area for improvement when it comes to outcomes, accessing and listening to families, and also tightening up some of our processes around safeguarding for our families with domestic abuse and living in, again, complex social needs out in the community, and that's something that we are exploring. But of those 4 signals, 5 pieces. 2 of the areas for improvement was sitting with maternity services, and we've absolutely looked at that guideline, tightened it up and presented flow charts and back to basics for midwives, which have been laminated and shared across the unit. And I'll just leave that there for any questions, if I may. Thank you.
Before we go to questions, can I just hear from Phil with Safety Champion?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies that there's no written report. Short notice I'll make an excuse of, but I will provide one next time. I'd have to say that my intention with my report is not to reiterate everything that comes in the Head of Midwifery report, but perhaps to look at things with a broader view, with some of the stuff that comes out of the Head of Midwifery report. Today, I'd just like to give Board 3 things to reflect on, things that we'll be looking into in a bit more detail and hopefully report back next time. And Kim has touched on some of them already. The MOS signals, I've been involved in the review of all of the cases. And one thing that has struck me, and it was highlighted by the induction of labour guidelines, is that we have a large number of guidelines and a large number of SOPs. And I'm not really in a place to say that I have an absolute assurance that we actually abide by those guidelines, whether they're embedded, and actually whether they're effective. So I think that we need to potentially look at that and consider not just audit of those policies within maternity, but perhaps as an organisation as a whole, as to see whether we're doing things in the right way. The second thing that struck me in my walkabout is, despite the appearance of Call the Midwife and Motherhood and Apple Pie, midwives do a lot more than deliver babies. And when you get down to the nitty-gritty in terms of a very short turnaround of admission, they're dealing with mums with potentially significant comorbidities. Lots of social deprivation issues, smoking, addiction, poverty, they're all there. We also have situations where there are quite a lot of safeguarding issues and dealing with domestic abuse problems. And another sort of slightly different view, which I would take as an ex-surgeon, a lot of surgical things which midwives are dealing with, which perhaps we could look at in a different way. So I think when we're looking at our future development of maternity services, we need to think perhaps in different ways about how we support the midwives do some of this work, or do all of their work. And then the final observation or thing to reflect on is Ockenden and Amos. The reports, I mean, we're all rightly shocked at the outcomes, but we need to consider the impact. And I think there's a twofold impact we need to look at. One is on the senior midwifery team, and I'm sure Kim's going to be very unhappy with me saying this, but there's a huge amount of extra work coming out of Ockenden and Amos, which we will need to address as an organisation. And the question is whether we have adequate resourcing within the midwifery service in order to do that. The other thing, which has already been touched upon, is we have to look at the impact of those reports on the midwives. And I think there's a perception that they're sort of lumped out of this, that they are the midwives, but actually they're affected by the outcomes of those reports just as much as every other member of the public. And my perception, I admitted it's individual, but it's backed up by what Kim has said, and also from talking to colleagues elsewhere, is that the midwives are feeling judged and under a microscope, and that's impacting on how they're able to do their work. That reflects in sickness, but there's a perception that they're under intense scrutiny, and what we should be doing is looking to support them to get on with their jobs. So I think we need to look at how we're providing psychological support for midwives in order to allow them to do their jobs properly. They would be the 3 things I would suggest we think about.
Thanks both Kim and Phil. So Adam's hand first. Oh, playing with pen, David.
David Jackson, Non-Exec Director. It's a compliment really. The last visit that I had to the maternity delivery suite was really brilliant. but there was a couple there who had been referred, been rushed in with that had issues, and they'd actually, from Durham, had actually elected to go to Cramlington because that's where they wanted their baby delivered. So appalled that they had to come to Durham, but actually they were just so supportive and appreciative of the care. I think you were there, Phil, weren't you? And it was just, and they would recommend Durham to everyone. So I think it's something you need to know. You need to pass that on. I'm sure it was passed on to many of the staff anyway. Thank you.
Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I just wanted to ask a question about the induction of labour, and just I couldn't quite work out whether the change in the annual rate of induction of labour was a good thing or about. So, do we want it to be higher? Do we want it to be lower? I wasn't quite clear.
Okay. So, with the publication of Saving Babies' Lives, that was born to reduce the national ambition of stillbirths, neonatal deaths, cases of HIE and preterm birth. Because of the recommendations within that, a lot more ladies are induced. So we're seeing nationally, this is not just locally, we're seeing nationally a rise in induction of labour rates to bring down the cases of stillbirths and neonatal deaths and preterm births across the nation. But we need to achieve that ambition. But yeah, it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because intervening early with ladies who've got reduced fetal movements or their babies smaller for gestational age is a good thing to prevent stillbirth. But obviously that puts capacity issues nationally, and obviously they come with a lot more requirements in terms of comorbidities and monitoring that's required, rather than a lady who might come in who has a spontaneous birth without any intervention. So there's a lot more care and care needs required around observations when somebody has an induction of labour. So the impact is potentially on the capacity and demand on the service. But hopefully the increase in rates has shown a drop in stillbirth rates and neonatal mortality. I hope that addresses. Yeah.
Liz.
Thanks so much. Added to that, is there a rise in the number of C-sections for the same reasons, and does that also have a negative impact on capacity?
It does, and yes, again, nationally we're seeing a huge increase in caesarean section rates, some cases up to 50% caesarean section rates. A lot of it is maternal choice, and the maternal choice is the loss of confidence in maternity services, because we go back to East Kentby Port, Morecambe Bay, Ockenden 2022, and of course the most recent publications, women become less comfortable and confident in midwifery services, so opt electively for caesarean sections. But then with the increase in induction of labour rates, there's also failure, and I shouldn't really use the word failure, it's not the woman's failure. Induction doesn't always work, so we use prostaglandins and mechanical methods of induction, and they don't always help the cervix to dilate, and if that doesn't work, then the only other option then is to proceed with a caesarean section. So yes, we are. And the second part to that question is, yes, it's having a huge impact on theatre lists from a capacity and demand perspective, and we've just done a capacity and demand exercise led by our general manager, Ellen Castling, who's looking at our theatre lists, looking at efficiencies and looking to increase the number of section lists that we have across both sites. So that does put a huge challenge on. Also, the women in birth and people who have a caesarean section have longer hospital stays afterwards because it's a major surgery, and they're at risk of VTE and infections and everything else. So that has a huge impact on your service in terms of capacity and care needs of those families. So, thank you.
Thanks, Kim and Phil, for that. I think quite a lot of reflection for the board generally in relation to maternity at the moment. So thank you. So just to conclude, we note the report, Kim and from Phil. Note the new National Board report as well, which I think will be helpful just to get that standardisation across all organisations. We'll put in the words that we need to put in for the Ms section.
Thank you.
So thank you both, but thanks, Kim. Lovely to see you again. So...
No, I think I'm the next agenda item.
So moving on, the mortuary safety reduction report, is that Warren or Jill, I think this is just something that we took through committee and signed off because we had to do it by the end of July. It's there in your pack if anyone's got any questions about it. But it was just, it flowed out of the Nottingham, was it Nottingham? It was Nottingham. And the mortuary problems that they uncovered there. So we've signed off a board declaration. We've got a couple of actions to take in relation to that, but it's there in the paper if anyone's got any questions. Adam.
It was just around the ongoing assurance that we seek against the areas that we had gaps, and obviously there was, in the conversation we had in the other forum we're doing this in, there was 2 or 3 areas that you were uncomfortable with, and I wasn't sure where we're going to be mapping those through to for ongoing assurance. I imagine Quality Committee.
I think Quality Committee is the place.
Yeah, and just say, Adam, we're just kind of following up and establishing some changes to the governance arrangements to better connect our oversight of mortuary services specifically into our wider governance. There was a couple of things that came out of the discussion in Quality Committee where we've, in the declaration, said, look, largely, but we've got a bit more work to do, and Jill's taking that forward with colleagues from the service.
Great, thank you. Elliot, we'll go on to learning from deaths.
So, Elliot Sykes, Chief Medical Officer. So I'll summarise both the report and the dashboard, if that's okay. So from a metric perspective, our hospital standardised mortality ratio is consistently the same within expected limits, whereas our SHMI, our summary hospital mortality indicator, is higher than expected at 126%. Our avoidability rates, which is our Hogan 4+ scores, so greater than 50% prediction of dying, are low, and we continue thematic analysis, which consistently flags up things, particularly in relation to deterioration. However, I need to caveat all of that with the fact that our overall review rates are low in terms of mortality case numbers, between 10 and 20%, and we have a very well described coding capacity gap, which has a heavy influence on the SHMI. We know when we do manually code, we code very well, but we have got a significant problem as a consequence with both primary diagnosis and comorbidity coding. There's an intervention plan in the paper, which I'll sort of highlight the key points from. So from the coding point of view, there is a commitment to invest with that and close the capacity gap, both in terms of the short term, but also to model the long term. And also we were exploring investment from an ICB perspective. However, I don't think this can and should be just about physical coding. We need to look at digital solutions, and there are some promising signs from an AI work stream from that perspective. On the digital point, again, there's been a lot of very positive work happened about consultant episodes. We have a problem with that chopping and changing as consultant ownership shifts. I don't think that will have an effect on mortality, but it's about creating good, consistent coding practice, and it will help from a coding perspective in the long run. And then there's some really good work has gone on with something called M-Pages within the EPR, which is helping in terms of capturing both primary diagnosis and comorbidities. Then there's a process aspect which stretches everything from the medical examiner function through to escalation processes, both for level 1 and level 2 reviews, a quality assurance piece from that perspective, and then what is a really important piece from my point of view, what I'll call sort of MDT ownership, how we get clinical services to own this across the board. And I think long term we should be aiming for something where we establish this as just part of core job plan, SPA, and core clinical governance, and people do a minimum number of these a year, but it's owned by the MDT, because that is how you get genuine learning. And then probably most importantly for me is the clinical intervention aspects. So everything I've said is going to take time, and SHMI takes time to play out if you have an improvement. So there is an aspect where we need to do things now, and that's where it links with Jill's patient safety paper and comments that we've had so far on board. So we've had Jill and I have had a conversation about triggers and news, and there's a paper currently being drafted which will probably articulate a case for change for both change in trigger thresholds and who responds. And then I think there's a conversation to be had about sepsis and how we map that to the new national framework, but look at it in the context of adults and children. So get on with the clinical interventions whilst we're doing all of these other things, and then just see what plays out. And then the final bit around the now and assurance, and whether we can enhance assurance on the metrics. Steve and I have talked earlier this week, and I'm in conversation with Tony Roberts from a NEQOS perspective about whether there's a methodology we can apply to the subgroup of patients who we've fully coded, and apply a shimmy analysis to that. It will carry caveats, but try and provide greater understanding and assurance, if it exists, for the now to the board and external agents on the metric itself. I'll take questions.
Thank you, Elliot. Adam?
Thanks, Elliot. Two points. One is that, so we flagged this, several, as you can imagine, through Quality Committee quite significantly, and we had it as an alert on board reports several times, several months ago. And we were given a follow-up action plan that came through, being an exec-led action plan, task and finish groups, coding, deteriorating patients, all of the things we've discussed. My concern is that, and I know you're on day 3, so this is not directed at you, but that we don't seem to have moved any of that forward. It doesn't feel like, it certainly doesn't feel like it, because it's not showing in the data, and in the paper it reads like we're still rolling things out that were presented in action plans 3 months ago. So that's point 1, just as a concern. Point 2, we've always taken, albeit from a small number of case reviews, 10-20%, some assurance around the 0.1% of the deaths that were potentially avoidable. But it does state in the paper here that there are limitations to the process. Are those limitations to the process leading to us taking false assurance in a 0.1%?
Okay, so in relation to the first question, I think in terms of appraising the current mortality process and the action plan, I think I can give good assurance that there is good executive ownership from a coding perspective and progressing that aspect. I think the rest of what's described in the action plan needs to take more shape in terms of mortality group and the clinical interventions. In terms of your second question, I think I need to understand more what I call the level 1 and level 2 review process. And what I mean by that, and why it's important, is what I'm unclear about at the moment is whether our current review process is a generic random review of cases at a specialty level. But what you need in terms of getting to the true answer on your avoidability rate and understanding of mortality generally is you need a healthy level 2 process, which reviews the escalated cases that are flagged either through complaints, PSIIs, etc. And I'm not clear we've got that at the moment. So in answer to your question, I need to understand the process more, which I'll do. But I cannot tell you right now whether our metrics and our numbers are truly reflective of a cross-section of our mortality case mix.
Anything else for Elliot? So you'll gather it has been an area of concern for us, Elliot, and I'm sure it is for you too. So good to see that it's getting the focus. So thank you. We'll note your report and the plan for improvement. Thank you. We've got patient safety and experience and IPC board for Jill. I'm conscious of time, Jill, so if you could pick out the highlights, that would be great.
Thank you, Alison. In terms of the patient safety and experience, I'll touch on a number of themes. If I start with patient experience, the paper details the really good progress with the real-time rollouts, which has continued in July, and we have visited 290 patients across all of our inpatient areas, and you can see the overall score of patients who deem their care to be good or very good is increasing, and you can see the themes for improvement, which are either local, there's lots of local ownership and action, but the broader themes are coming through our patient experience group, which will feed into patient safety and experience exec-led group, up into quality committees to close the loop on what patients are telling us from an inpatient perspective. Far less positive is our complaints in terms of the numbers that we are receiving, our ability to close them in a timely manner, and our work around the backlog, which is absolutely impacting on our ability to deal with complaints that come in. There is definitely a theme of complaints as a standard rather than resolving things in real time, which we need to absolutely get underneath and tackle. We have reduced our overdue complaints of 65% when the report was written. It's improved from that position, and I've got detail by care group of any that are outstanding with a rationale, i.e. a family meeting, or without a rationale, and what's the timeline to close that down. I think in terms of our focus, the large proportion of complaints are not about inpatient care, which I think resonates with what we're seeing in real time and what we're all seeing on our board assurance visits. So we need to really look at where we're targeting our effort and focus it on non-inpatient care. We have established a group that is, the first meeting is the 14th of this month, to look at the Waiting Well survey feedback and how do we look at the whole appointments access piece, because we know from 25-26, 21% of complaints were associated with outpatients and waiting. So I think we need to flip some of our focus and work and put our efforts into areas other than inpatient services. Whilst not taking our eye off inpatient services, I think it's very clear we need to do something different. In terms of incidents, again, we are looking to manage a historic backlog of overdue incidents, and we've made a 70% reduction in those overdue. And again, that was when the paper was written, and that is improving. There was a backlog of PSAIs, and you can see in the paper that there is a plan to have them through exec sign-off by the end of September. We've got a number coming to the August meeting. We do, in terms of what's different now, we have dedicated PSAI investigators who are investigating things in a timely way, so that process should be much improved. I won't touch upon deterioration because Elliot has detailed the work that we're doing. I would just like to touch on duty of candour, which is just not shifting. Our intention is to have a set of weekly metrics and work with care groups in a sort of stand-up huddle around looking at where we are by care group and what the action needed to be taken, because the actions that we're taking today is just not shifted the dial, so we need to do something different in that regard. I'm happy to pause there, Alison, and take any questions on the patient safety and experience.
Any questions on that? Maggie?
Maggie Pavlon-Ned. I think I mentioned this before at board, and it's just about that complaint level, that process. I just wonder whether we do need, as you said, to think very differently about in effect, a professional customer service approach, a proactive approach, as opposed to the same people trying their very best to do something that actually is a professional skill of how you do that. And I just think we're probably missing that.
I think you're right, Maggie, and I also think there's a broader customer care piece for us to do across the organisation, as well as how we respond to patient experience in real time and sort it out, rather than people having to write a complaint and then wait for us to respond. So I agree with you.
Anything else on that? No. Well, we'll note that. Thank you. And IPC?
Thank you, Alison. So the IPC report covers the month of July. In terms of the threshold, we've got our upper thresholds, which are largely unchanged from 25-26. We have had no MRSA bacteremia since November last year, so it's the 7th consecutive month. Our MSSA bloodstream infections are slightly over our locally set upper threshold, and our Clostridium difficile is under threshold, which is a real positive. Gram-negatives continue to be a concern, and we're doing quite a bit of focus work on urinary catheter management, but we need to do some more collective work on gram-negative bloodstream infections. We have had 2 periods of increased incidence of Clostridium difficile, but with different ribotypes, and we've had a CPE outbreak on the Darlington site in July, which is being effectively managed. Continued focus in all elements of infection prevention and control practice is required. Absolutely can't take our eye off the ball in any element of practice. Real focus on diarrhea management, which is an area where we need to do better on. We're seeing far more use of hydrogen peroxide vapor fogging, which I think is having a difference. Also, in the first quarter of the year, we have had no derogations for IPC for operational reasons, and I think that shows there haven't been any requests. So I think that shows some green shoots of change in culture and the importance of IPC, which is a positive. I'm going to touch briefly on the antimicrobial resistance objectives, and we'll perhaps bring Stuart Brown, our pharmacist, back to the next meeting. But in summary, you can see that the objectives that we set around reducing watch and reserve antibiotics, it's having some impact, largely driven by formula change. Lots of work around strengthening medical engagement, which is a work in progress, but with some dashboard development to get really down to speciality-based prescribing, ward-based prescribing, to really look at how that's being affected. The IV to oral switch, there's been a small reduction. I think this is an area we have much more to do. We are a high user of IV antibiotics compared to others in the patch. There's some focus work happening in front of house because they're the biggest users of IV antibiotics. So pharmacy colleagues are doing some work there. Our audit results are generally positive. Our overall use of antibiotics has increased. That's not to be unexpected, because as we reduce the watch and reserve antibiotics, which may be 1 dose, we may have to put 2 in, but that's not unexpected, and that's not out with others. So I'll pause there and take any questions. Thank you.
Generally really positive, Jill, for all the hard work that's gone into that, and that's probably one of those areas where we're beginning to see it embed, in that it's happening over time, which is really, really positive. Any questions on IPC? No. Thank you. Well, we'll note the positive nature of that report. Thank you, Jill. Moving on to finance. In Hayley's absence, Rob's going to do a swan song for us. So I'll hand it over to you, Rob. We are short on time, as you'll gather. So anything you can do to bring us back in the line would be great.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Rob Clark, Financial Improvement Director. Just to present the report as at month 3, which is the end of quarter 1. We're reporting a deficit of £7.5 million, which is better than planned by about £0.4 million. In the absence of deficit support funding, that is, which we earn on a quarterly basis, or rather is reviewed on a quarterly basis. As we were reporting this, we'd been just told that we'd been successful in terms of Q1, so we will receive Q1 deficit support funding, but unfortunately we've not yet been successful in Q2, which was accessed at the same time. So the position with the deficit support funding would be a deficit of 4.6 million, which I'd say, 4.2 million, which would still be 4.4 million better than plan. Worth saying that the deficit support funding, there is an opportunity to catch that up, so we will be reassessed in month 5, as Steve put in his report, but there's also just as much opportunity for it to be revoked, so we need to sustain that performance. Just a couple of things I wanted to pick out. So pay, we remain overspent in pay, largely due to temporary staffing, WIs and ECPs in medical staffing, extra contractual payments, in medical staffing. Within that as well, there's an overspend in medical bank of around 600,000, albeit about 400,000 of that is unfunded bank costs related to the industrial action that took place in April. Non-pay, on a point of good news, is performing very well. We remain below last year's run rate and a good trajectory on non-pay. And that's continuing, albeit we remain carefully looking at that carefully, because we also do remain behind on ERF activity, and some of that is in TNO, which obviously we know that quite a lot of the costs of TNO, non-pay costs, are quite high, so we'll keep an eye on that. CIP delivery, I can't believe we've got to this point in the board and not mentioned CIP in great detail, but CIP performance at month 3 we were over delivering, which is also good news, by 400,000. This is, however, largely due to non-recurrent measures, so focus has to remain on that, converting that into recurrent savings. It's also worth noting that the profile of delivery starts ramping up from Q2. So, but as was alluded to in the AAA that Adam presented on the Finance Performance Committee, we took a paper in July which outlined we've now fully identified the CIP target. So obviously risk adjusted, there's still lots of risk associated with that, but one of the reasons we didn't get awarded deficit support funding in Q2 is because we hadn't identified the full value of the CIP target, which we now have, so good news. A little bit on cash, we have some high cash values at the moment. That's largely due to timing of payments from commissioners, which will unwind over the remainder of the year. And finally, capital, albeit capital is underspent by quite a sizable amount year to date. That's largely due to PDC funding, and we plan to catch up on those schemes as well. But we are monitoring that situation on a regular basis and pulling forward schemes where we can to offset that underspend.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Any questions on that? No? Thank you very much. We'll note that report. Moving on, we've got workforce and OD verbal by exception. Is there anything, Michelle?
There's nothing by exception.
Yeah, that was the right answer. And our next one is our annual report for health inequalities. We have Hayley down there. Hayley, when you speak, if you just press the button so your red comes on, and I shall hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to, hi, I'm Hayley Coleman, I'm Public Health Consultant at the Trust. I'm here to provide the annual update to Board around health inequalities and elements of prevention. So you'll find 2 reports in your pack. The first is a more technical report that meets the Trust's legal duty around health inequalities reporting. NHSE requires Trust to publish a statement on health inequalities in its wider annual Trust report, and it includes a narrative around certain CLOEs and some indicators. The second one is a more broader operational annual report around health inequalities and elements of prevention to give you a flavour of the work streams, and it's the second year that we've produced this. Conscious of time, so I'll just pull out some successes, some challenges and some discussion points if that's okay. So positively, over the last year, the work programmes have progressed, expanded. We've got activity in each care group now around health inequalities. From a governance point of view, we have got a clear route governance in the new governance structure, and we're really pleased that Kelly is now our executive lead as well for that. And I think one of the big gains has been our systems partnership this year. We've really developed, working closely with our councils, with primary care. We're around the table a lot now with system discussions around prevention, especially neighbourhood health, which has been good for communication and building relationships, but also opened up opportunities that we're already utilising. Challenges. The main reason, I suppose, we've given partial assurance is the majority of the work is still probably centrally driven or driven by motivated individuals, and we need to move to that become business as usual. We need to move to consistently integrate, I suppose, equity and preventative lenses on our reporting, decision making, and our core care. Prevention needs to be seen as part of core care, not an added extra. Data is probably our other end challenge. One, enabling us to get them insights to see if inequalities exist in access, experience and outcomes. So can we identify that? Are we recording it? And then do we have the confidence in our data quality to use that in that way? So our asks and discussion points of yourselves. Practically, we ask that you please endorse a report on the work programme for next year. And then I suppose for us, it's about giving that visible leadership endorsement. I think we really want you to champion prevention and inequality work as part of as a core organisational priority, so we can signal clearly to our care groups that this is not an added thing to do. This is part of core operation and core care. And I think we need to do that through our operational metrics as well. So when you're viewing them performance indicators, you need to be seeing how many a percentage of inpatients screen for smoking, because that is up there and important. When you're looking at our DNA and wasn't brought rates, you're seeing that split by our core 20 population as well, to give that insight. And I think that'll give us the cultural and that strategic shift that we need for care groups to take that as core business as well. The second one is a ask of yourselves. It might be cheeky, but so embed that curious and challenging leadership ask around health inequalities and prevention. So consistently adopt that equity questioning and prevention focusing use scrutiny at board, routinely asking for demographic splits, the population impact or the difference in that, and whether the proposed changes affect different groups. And again, that'll help us move from that project-based stuff to business as usual. And then the final one is quite bold, I suppose, but it's to support that transformational change in care models, back that shift to prevention, care closer to home, admission avoidance, and that partnership working that looks at the whole person. I think we need your leadership endorsement to make sure that our pathways become proactive and preventative, and that will make it more equitable and sustainable. We're in a position now where we can't stem demand. Our services are not serving the population anymore. Our population is older, they're more complex socially, they've got multiple morbidity. And if we just continue to do what we've always done, then we won't stem demand or improve patient outcomes. So we really need to tackle the root causes and drivers of ill health in our pathways as well, and take that bolder approach. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hayley. It's really good to see all of the success you've had in terms of the last year as well as the challenge to us going forwards. Adam.
Thank you, Adam Crofton, Non-Exec Director. And Hayley, I know we gave this a good airing at Quality Committee, and I'm probably going to repeat some of the stuff I said there, but it's just an absolutely wonderful report to read, and I cannot endorse further the need to which you said for this to be embedded as core business in everything that we do. If we are truly committed to delivering neighbourhood health and reducing the number of people who walk through our hospital doors every day and having a preventative approach, this has to become one of the most important things as a board we talk about. And I think Hayley's challenge is warranted because we don't give it enough airtime in everything that we do.
Do you want to say something?
Just quickly on that, so completely agree with that. That's why one of the priorities is health before hospital. And we haven't had a chance to bring it to the board yet because it's still in sort of development, but we are currently exploring some work on multimorbidity that Jen, Steele and Shafi, now Elliot's been briefed on it. So it needs more work for us to shape out the approach and whilst take this in the spirit that it's intended. That work will be led by what we won't do is say, Hayley, Victoria, please could you go off and do this piece of work? It will be, this is a core part of how we operate and run with Hayley and Victoria embedded in it rather than it outsourced, if that makes sense. We've got a lot to do to get that in place, but I just wanted to give a little bit of reassurance that that's been in our minds and there's some work that's taking place.
Liz.
Thank you, Liz Bromley. I'm a non-exec. Really good report, really good reading, and such a lot of effort gone into it. How much do the communities that we serve, and you reference them repeatedly, actually understand the motivation behind this and the opportunities that are afforded to them? Because this reminds me very much of widening access to education from some years ago. And originally it was kind of like, we all knew about it internally, but out there it was still a lot of people were like, well, this isn't about me, it's not for me. Over the years, that perception has changed tremendously, so everybody expects to be able to go to university. How much do you feel your communities that you refer to understand that the system is not necessarily fair to me and that I don't necessarily do the things that I need to do because I'm not being told about them?
Thank you. It's a good question. I think there's a mix. So I think there's an understanding there in some communities, but I think some communities just it's not that they understand it, but they feel the barriers to access, they experience it. But I don't know if they understand that that is different for them to others. I think there's a lot of work to be done with our communities around education, not just, you know, but equipping people with the skills to think about where they can access care, how they can access care. We have a lot of community services on offer in our patch, you know, provided by our councils, our voluntary sector, which are great. And it's how do we make sure that we're linking into them. It's not about creating new things or investing in big new things. It's about how we link our what's already there in a better way. So to the patient, it seems like a pathway. So you come to us to, I don't know, you maybe it's referred to respiratory, but part of your pathway is that you are picked up by, to address smoking, that you're picked up by our adult wellbeing to look at weight management and moving more. You're picked up by a social prescriber from primary care to look at how you manage maybe your mental health or isolation. And the patient just sees that as part of their care plan, you know, having one care plan that covers medical, social, environmental. You might, when you're in hospital, you might see, I don't know, someone who will offer advice and support around welfare and guidance. It's all seen as like one treatment plan, one care plan. I think there's a lot of work to do around that, and there's a lot of work to do with patients to understand actually all these factors are affecting your health. But at the same time, we need to look at how we provide care and say, actually, what matters to you as a patient? What can we tackle first? Because a lot of these patients have such complex social needs that, you know, us just telling them to stop smoking or drink less isn't fair and it isn't good enough. So we have to be thinking about actually how do we get you to someone who can work through your journey with you at the pace needed for you and link you into these support services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kerry, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Kelly Angus, Deputy Chief Executive, and just to say a huge thank you to Victoria and Hayley for the work that they've done on this. But we've talked a lot about culture at various different points, and there's a huge amount of work that can be done here for our staff. And we will be working very closely with Michelle and colleagues around how we make that connection, because we draw our workforce from our local communities. So just to mention that as an aside, but thank you. It's been really helpful.
Thank you very much, Hayley. As you'll see, it is a subject that is close to the heart of a lot of people sitting around this table. So you'll be hearing more and more, hopefully, from us as we get the quality of data as well, is part of it for us at board level, I think.
Thank you. And we appreciate your time.
Thank you. That takes us on to board assurance and key risks. Warren, the BAF.
Yeah, so I'll give a very quick summary in the interest of time. So the board assurance framework follows the 6 priorities that were in Steve's paper earlier. Thankfully, I did get sight of Steve's paper before I submitted this, so with some rapid updating and reordering, they do match. It aims to set out a helicopter view of the assurance position for each of those 6 objectives, both in terms of commentary, but also with a risk rating and taking on board feedback from the last board meeting and assurance rating. It shows the trend in the risk rating and also, again, taking on board previous feedback, a high-level view of essentially success factors that would show you that the risk is reducing. It draws very heavily on the evidence that comes up through the assurance committees, including the scrutiny of that evidence and the AAA reporting. Unsurprisingly, this is only the 3rd version of this BAF to board 5 months in. Given the nature of the objectives and the challenges we've talked around this table, for 5 of the 6 objectives, the risk rating is still red. But what you can see both in the commentary on the assurance position and also in some of the assurance ratings, particularly those at committee level, they're moving from limited to partial. Limited meaning we've still got significant gaps in that assurance. Partial meaning we still have some gaps, but we've got a greater degree of confidence in the actions being taken. And I think that's consistent with the conversation we've had earlier about there being improvement to recognise as well as still a fair degree of challenge. You have got the risks over tolerance, corporate or local, so that you get the full picture and how they align to each objective. What you can see immediately from the analysis that we've put there is that we have a cohort of risks that are more than 24 months old and some over 12 months old. That's firmly within the sights of the risk and compliance group. They will be working through the reds in some detail with the risk owners to make sure that we've got appropriate actions if we need to, if they are indeed red, we need to address them late in a couple of weeks' time. Everyone's been tasked to look at those risks over 12 and 24 months old, and to make sure that when they're having their performance reviews with executive directors, they are bringing their support requests there rather than just sitting on things that have been there for some time. It's here for final validation by the board, essentially, and I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anything that we have talked about today that isn't accurately reflected on the BAF? Is there any changes that are needed as a result of what we've talked about, do we think? Rob.
Sorry, Rob Clark, Financial Improvement Director. Probably just worth flagging that we had a NISTA review of the Shotley Bridge Hospital programme recently, and one of their recommendations was around improving line of sight and governance into the Trust Board, so we probably need to think about how that links into some of that as well. But just to note it here, we've discussed Shotley Bridge at the board previously, but just to flag that probably need to be added.
No, good point, Rob, thank you. Adam?
I would say that I think that I want to be blunt. I think the embedding of how we deal with the BAF through committees and how we work with the BAF is not as effective as it could or should be. And I think that we need to challenge ourselves as a board and as committee chairs to through the next round of committees to spend more quality time doing some deep dives on the BAF in relation to its current risk position, how it's informing the discussions that we're having, and are the actions and mitigations in place the right ones still, through the lens of where we are now versus where they were when we wrote this.
I think that was touched on at F&P, wasn't it, in terms of having the BAF as one of your first items and also having it as your last item, just to see what the change has been in between. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Warren, for that. I'm not aware of any other business, unless anyone else has. I did say at the beginning that we would have a bit of a review of the meeting. I know we are over time and lunch is calling, but in terms of where we think we got to as an organisation against what we set out to do a number of months ago, do we think that we've made a good start in relation to that? Are we happy with our current trajectory and our priorities? Are we going in the right direction, I guess, is the overall question. Do we feel that what we've heard today would suggest that? Lisa.
Thank you. I think it goes back to what I said at the beginning. I think we've laid the foundations. The next phase for us is seeing the impact and people feeling the impact. And that's the bit that I think I haven't, I'm not able to demonstrate that at this point in time. So I think if we are able as a board to demonstrate the impact of our foundations going forward, then we're doing the right things. But we just need to get to that next stage.
It's that embedding with some of it, isn't it? Adam?
So 2 points. I think there's the positivity around the level of transparency and discussion needs to be noted, because I think where we are now versus where we were, we are surfacing and we are being very transparent in the issues and the discussions that we're having around the board tables, in committees and across the organisation. So that's one. I think the second one, almost linked to Lisa's, we are seeing green shoots, we are seeing some movement in some areas. I get frustrated with pace. I think I make that apparent sometimes. But we recognise that we all are struggling against the tide sometimes. Too much is happening based on heroic leadership of individuals rather than systems that work well. And I think that's where the challenge will become, that we are doing too much based on people doing more than necessary or above and beyond, rather than the system working for them.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Maggie?
Thank you, Pablo and Ned. Just to concur, really, but I think we've still got the challenge of so much stuff to be done, and we have got to be brutal with ourselves to reach a level of priority that not everything can be a priority at the moment. I wish it could, but it can't be, and we're going to have to just nail that on, otherwise we're always going to get pulled in different directions. I think the level of transparency is great, and we seem to know where we're at, but somebody quoted that they felt like they were playing whack-a-mole sometimes in all of the different things, and somehow that's got to stop. There's always a need to respond to drama, absolutely, but this proactivity of process, I think, has got to now take over rather than those individual acts.
David?
David Jackson, non-executive director. I think for me it's the number of new execs and the way the execs are working. It really feels like they are working together and they're complementing each other's skills and abilities. So that's the thing that's coming through for me, and also that's demonstrating or showing that there are plans in place, but they're being acted upon. Often we'll see plans, but then very little activity about sort of implementing that plan. But that seems to be happening, and certainly in infection prevention, that's actually starting to show results across.
I think there has been a lot of positive. We start with a very positive story, and I think there is a lot of good going on in our organisation, and I think we're beginning to see some of that get to our level. We've got a lot of challenge, and we've got a lot of prioritisation to do, Maggie, you're absolutely right. But I think we can take a lot of positives away from today. So, yeah, it's making me feel better, if it's any help to anyone. I'd just like to thank those who sat in our public gallery for your time, for your attention. Those who are watching live stream or watch at some point in the future, thank you for your interest and for your commitment of sitting through however many hours we've been here. And thank you for the board for their contributions. We're a little bit behind time, so can I say we come back about 2:10? Thank you.